A ruthless battle rages on the cold winter battlefield. The sounds of clashing iron are intertwined with the quiet echoes of unfulfilled promises. However, the real beginning of this story is the hideous shiny axe blade that announces the defeat of one of the warriors. A sudden and powerful blow instantly envelops the warrior, tearing his desire for victory to pieces. The energy of this blow is felt like an invisible wave raging past him. The era of one of the warriors ends in an instant. His head is separated from his body, which has not yet fallen to the ground. Next to him, wrapped in iron chains, stands the victorious warrior whose cold determination secured his victory. The warrior, wrapped in iron chains, seems to be a master of his craft. He stands before a beaten enemy, covered in blood. Behind him sits an old man who is breathing with difficulty and asks if he managed to kill his opponent. The warrior turned to the old man and, with a slight irony in his voice, asked him if he could see the severed head, because it was already more than obvious. The old man replies that he has not seen anything for a long time because he is blind. He looks like a monk, and his face and clothes are also covered with blood, hinting at his participation in the battle. The warrior regrets that it is a pity that the old man could not see this spectacle. Slowly, step by step, the warrior approaches the old man, making his way through the snowy mountains where they find themselves. He kneels down in front of the old man and tells him that it is over. The old man encourages him, telling him that he has done a very good job. The young man replies that the old man's merits are no less, because it took the 7 Genome clan several years to flood the Central Plains with blood. In the end, the Pecto and Higo clans had to unite to fight back against their common enemy. And today is the day when their common enemy is on his knees, beheaded. This moment emphasizes that the time has come for the final battle, in which the thief is defeated. Our hero's life is coming to an end. He closes his eyes, realizing that it has passed extremely quickly. When the old man asks him if he feels well, the hero replies that he could not be better. The old man, in turn, realizes that, as expected, the boy in front of him is a great master of the dark path, and if it weren't for him, the Higo clan would have been destroyed about 10 years ago. Holding his wound, the great master can also speak of the old man sitting by the stone. If it were not for the old man's merits, the Pecto clan could have been wiped out. Grateful, he thanks Vladika Murimov. Hearing this, Vladika Murimov could not help but agree with him. Although it was hard for him to laugh, he smiled at the hero's warm words, for he was facing the Emperor of Darkness. However, despite this warm conversation after the victory, the old man had one more question for the warrior. This question sounded unexpected to our hero. Since he is a descendant of the great Pecto family, why did he go over to the side of Higo and become their leader? The Emperor of Darkness was listening to this, his ears wide open. It was a very difficult question, and it needed a correct answer. The Emperor thought for a minute, considering his answer. Eventually, the warrior bowed his head and said that it was just the way it was. But for the old man, this answer seemed like a manifestation of boredom. The Emperor of Darkness, in turn, asked how long Vladika would last, to which he replied that he would not even live half a day. The Emperor took upon himself the responsibility of seeing him off on his last journey, for which the elder expressed his boundless gratitude. But during their dialogue, a warrior approached the scene, his spear sparkling with pink energy. He did not notice the old man, but he saw the Emperor of Darkness. As the warrior approached, he suddenly delivered a fatal blow to the chest of the Emperor of Darkness, which was so strong and unexpected that the hero, caught off guard, could not believe what had happened. This blow came as a great surprise to him, as it was fatal. He saw that a needle had pierced his heart. The enemy turned out to be the man he thought was dead. It was Tang Guang with a glow on his finger emitting an aura like pink power, and his vitality proved that he was not dead. All of this was planned by an old man who admitted at the time of the death of the Emperor of Darkness that he organized it to stop him because no one else could do it. He will repent for his actions in the afterlife. The first to go is the old man who, after saying goodbye to see you soon, died. At this point, our hero is bleeding, and the snow around him is no longer white. He asks himself the question, why did fate have such an end in store for him? Why, in any case, was he destined to die? Why did his life turn out to be so disturbing and difficult? His memory recalls how 26 years ago his world collapsed when the Bixanjan clan fell. His father was killed in battle, and his younger brother died early. He found himself alone in a great emptiness, and there was no one around whom he could rely. Eventually he sided with Higdo and rose to the position of commander-in-chief, achieving his goals at any cost. All his life he fought desperately for a place in the sun, and now his life ends in death in the pain of battle. And he realizes that it was not all in vain. The last moments of his life were filled with pain and betrayal. But his life was beautiful, despite the fact that his eyes were closed forever. But sometime after the darkness, his eyes began to open, and he saw light. In front of him he saw a man in the lotus position who said, "Learn to fulfill your duty to the clan, and you will attain enlightenment." Looking around, he saw that this man was sitting on top of the temple, and our hero was surrounded by people kneeling and worshipping him. As he squares his shoulders, he doesn't understand whether it's a dream, an illusion, or he's dreaming. And suddenly, out of the blue, some guy touches his clothes, calling him brother. Our hero looks angrily at the man who touched him, not understanding his intentions. The man who touched him gestures to him to continue worshipping, because the ceremony is not over yet, and to take a seat quickly, as his father is watching. Horror appears on the boy's face when he recognizes the familiar features on the young man's face. He suddenly shouts, "Jeepin!" right during the ceremony, attracting the attention of everyone present. He rushes to his brother, starting to hug him, but his brother does not understand why he's behaving so emotionally. His brother asks him, "What is wrong with you? What happened, brother?" But our hero was so excited to see Jeepin that he forgot to think about why his brother, who died 20 years ago, appeared in this place. The warm voice he's missed for so long pierces his ears, calling him Hojong. It makes him freeze in place. After all, this is the voice of his own father, who also died a long time ago during the battle. He turns to the man, realizing that it is indeed his father, because his voice cannot be confused with anyone else. Turning around, he sees the silhouette of a strong, bearded man looking at him with a stern look. When the boy wakes up, he doesn't understand whether it's an illusion or whether he actually saw his father. But despite his doubts, he wants to hug his father, whom he has missed for so long. He rushes to him to express his respect and love. However, for the father, it is just a normal day with his children, and he grabs his son's hand, activating his power. He squeezes so hard that the guy falls to his knees, unable to resist the pain. The boy realizes that it is indeed his father who is protecting him from being embarrassed in front of a large number of people. His father looks at him sternly, and the anger in his eyes could be a warning that his behavior was disrespectful. My father asks, "You're acting like you've gone crazy. Are you in your right mind to make so much noise during the ceremony?" Despite his son's behavior, the father waits for an answer. But before that, he sends him to his ancestral home for 3 days to apologize to the dead for his actions. After these words, the father looks at his son with a bit of shame. But our hero was not confused, and, although he was glad to see his father, he could not resist his word, and accepted his father's sentence, ready to serve his sentence. At that moment, he realizes that he is truly alive. He looks at his body and notices that it looks surprisingly young. His skin is smooth, without the usual wounds, scars, and calluses. Anything that reminded him of the battles is gone forever. Looking back, he realizes that he has returned to the days of his Paeksanjin clan. This seems strange to him, because he thought he was dead. After a while, a guard escorts him through the green gardens to his ancestral home. There, the door slammed in his face with a slamming sound. Standing at the door, the boy realizes that his father, as always, is ruthless, and has locked him in this room for 3 days. However, this was not so important to him, because he was more concerned with the question, why did he come back? He couldn't even be happy, because he couldn't find an explanation, which was becoming a big problem for him. After straining his mind, he realizes that he is in a very difficult situation. Falling on the carpet that covered the floor of this house, he still had no answers, and his thoughts did not bring any solution. However, as he looked up at the ceiling, he came up with an idea. Perhaps it was all part of something bigger that he hadn't yet realized. The boy thought for a moment and realized that he was young enough that he didn't even know his real age. How old is he now? 18 or maybe 19? It's not quite clear, but apparently it's autumn, and judging by the appearance of Jeepin's father, he's gone back about 26 years. This means that they are facing a horror that will take the lives of his family and clan forever. Horrified, he realizes all the consequences that await him on this path forward. After all, there's not much time left before his Paeksanjin clan is destroyed. And despite everything, he can't just lie there, because he can prevent it. He rushes to the door. Opening the door, he sees his young brother who has come to visit him. The boy stops for a moment when he sees his young brother Jeepin. In turn, his brother asks him, "Where are you going?" Our hero was embarrassed and did not find the words to answer, because his brother took him by surprise. However, his brother continued to insist that the hero should not leave this place, because he needed to spend 3 more days in his ancestral home. All this was true, and our hero agreed with it. But why he was here seemed a mystery. Then his brother started digging into his pocket, about to say that regardless of the consequences, he was worried about his brother's spirit, which had to spend 3 days in the house drinking only water. He brought his brother some goodies to cheer him up. In this way, I wanted to encourage him so that he would not be upset by what was happening. However, the Emperor of Darkness realized that in 6 months his brother would die, and this fate would befall all living things in this city. Jippen quickly handed him the treat, worried that his father might notice, but his thoughts did not leave the Emperor, and he could not calm down, knowing that his father would soon be gone. Who is the head of the clan will die by the sword along with his powerful clan, and the life of the young warrior will turn into a nightmare where he will suffer forever. People who are supporters of his clan will die instantly, without even having time to do anything, and this is not a joke. The horror that was bequeathed in our hero's soul remains forever, and he makes a promise to himself to be the one to strike first. Not only will he do this, but he will also prepare the clan for defense by embracing his brother and taking full responsibility for what is happening. In his previous life, he was the Emperor of Darkness, having become so through a harsh life and cruel fate. Now, with the memories and experience of the past, he will find everyone and destroy anyone who thinks of harming his family. The boy abruptly opens the door of the temple and runs out, driven by a strong desire to change the events that could prove fatal for him and his clan. He confidently walks along the paths he used to run as a child, heading to the church where his father is buried. Upon entering the clan's central administration chamber, the boy is greeted by servants who address him as a young master. As he continues his journey, he tries not to waste energy. The young master approaches the entrance to his father's office, which is guarded by 2 sword-wielding soldiers. Showing their respect, the soldiers bow down to greet the young master and ask him what brought him here. The guy confidently replies that he needs to meet his father for some reasons. But the warriors explain that they are not allowed to enter without a special reason, as the rules are very strict. If the clan head has not summoned him, he cannot enter. One of the soldiers comes closer to the young master, and with all seriousness, he tells him right to his face that in this case he cannot come in. The guy had his own arguments to counter their refusals. He explained that he had a very urgent task. Since the soldiers were obliged to obey the order, they could not let the boy through, as no visitors were allowed before noon. The young master was upset when he heard the refusal, but they invited him to come back later. Then he asked them to give a message to his father. "Tell my father," asked the young master, "that I will begin to study the true Azure silk technique." The soldiers were so impressed by his words that they could hardly pronounce the technique, even stuttering. They turned pale and appeared to be deeply shocked by this message. Surprised, one of them asked if they understood correctly that he wanted them to tell his father about learning the true Azure silk technique. The guy confirmed their words and ordered them to pass on the message, after which he left. As he left the management estate, he saw the landscapes of his childhood. He swore to himself that he would master the true Azure silk technique. This news caused a real stir among the members of the Yen clan, as the true Azure silk technique is considered one of the most important martial arts of the clan. No one could believe that the boy had taken such a step. The fact is that it is almost impossible to master this technique without prior training. To reach this level, one must first master the soaring swallow technique, which requires tremendous strength and endurance, available only to the chosen ones, like the second young master. When our hero leaves the manor, he is met by his brother, who warmly greets the young master. The story reveals that in his past life, although John did not visit his brother Jippen, his outstanding brother had great talent, and the head of the clan often mentioned Jippen, losing sight of his first son, Hajan. Because of this, Hajan treated his younger brother as if he didn't even exist. But one day, everything would change. The 2 brothers were walking along an autumn path, and Hojun talks about Huda, a very severe punishment, wondering how one can endure 3 days on water alone. His brother always tried to be good in everything and despite being punished by his father, supported Hojun. He wanted to please his brother Hojun and offered to buy him some food. Peng, in turn, said he had found a place he liked and named it Goyanglu. After these words, the young master turned to his brother Jipping, aiming to break the circle of misunderstandings between them. His intentions were clear, to put an end to the arbitrariness in their relationship. Jipping was nervous about his brother's unpredictable behavior and swallowed a tear. "I have treated you very badly, and I am sincerely sorry for my behavior," said the young master. Jipping was deeply shocked by these words. They hit him like a bolt from the blue. The young master continued, "I consider myself a scoundrel for not appreciating your success and not supporting you. I have been acting petty and like a big child, driven by foolish pride." He asked his brother for forgiveness, sighing deeply, and promised that it would not happen again. When Jipping heard his brother's words, he was so moved that tears welled up in his eyes. He tried to stop him, but Hajin continued, "I am very sorry for all the trouble I have caused you. I don't want you to blame me if you can't forgive me." As Jiping comprehended his brother's words, he realized that Hajin had changed and he no longer hated him. At these words, Jiping could not stand it and burst into tears, and the young master gently wiped the tears from his face. This gave the young master the long-awaited sense of relief he had been seeking all his life after his bitter loss. He tried to comfort his brother, hoping that he would stop crying and that everything in their lives would be restored. This scene was closely watched by the guards, who were again shocked by the events. It was strange for them to see the young master in such an emotional state. We moved to Goyanglu, a place illuminated by autumn leaves with a house standing on the shore. The young master and his brother decided to have a delicious fish dinner to finally make peace. They began a dialogue in which they could finally talk normally after a long separation. Jiping noticed that his brother's gait had changed significantly, and it was obvious that he no longer looked like his old self. It gave the impression that he had turned into a completely different person, different from who he was before. While eating fish, Jiping noticed that his brother Hajin's ki energy was moving through his body, which seemed incredible to him. The young master explained that he had spent the last 3 days practicing in the ancestral house. There he practiced lotus meditation and circulated chi energy using the soaring swallow method. It was very risky for him because his body was still unadapted and too young for such tests. During this technique, the stress on blood vessels, bones, and muscles could have led to a regression in his physical condition. But despite all the pain and obstacles, he overcame them to unleash his inner ki energy. He activated all his knowledge and strength to break the wall of inability and move to a new level. This helped ignite his ki energy and gave him a chance to surpass himself. However, it was extremely difficult, and his body could barely withstand the load. He stubbornly walked forward, saving all his strength not to die from those practices, and the blood gushed out of his nose. And now his brother Japan is watching him and giving him 7 stars for his technique. In a state of shock, Japan begins to realize that Hajin may have mastered this complex technique. Hajin replies that yes, he has indeed mastered the soaring swallow method. Jinping even got up from his seat at the great news. He congratulates his brother, because mastering such a technique in a short time is a great achievement, and the change in gait due to the awakening of ki energy is further proof. It was amazing that his younger brother could notice the slight changes in his body just by looking at him. Hajin realized that he had truly accomplished the incredible. But suddenly something unplanned happened in this wonderful bar, distracting Jinping's attention. Our hero says that his friends have come, 3 of them, one of them is quite strong. The younger brother decides to greet them and goes to the door to open it. But suddenly he crashes into the figure of one of them, causing an unexpected encounter. Looking up, he saw a girl with a disgruntled expression looking at him as if he were something unpleasant. Without having time to apologize, they passed him by and continued on their way. A man was walking by and asked her if the view from this window in the bar was not great. She indifferently replied that she didn't particularly like the view, and her name was Namgun Sanghua. Our hero was watching the couple from the outside, drinking tea and eating lunch, listening attentively to their conversations. Squinting his eyes and covering his face with a cup, he watched the couple with a serious look. Namgun Sangwa's servant suggested that she try the fish at this restaurant to improve her mood. But after saying that, he noticed Jepin and was surprised to see him. When Jinpan saw his friend, he invited him to meet his older brother, which raised doubts among his friends. As soon as they looked at him, the young master introduced himself as Hojun and made a greeting bow to his brother's friends. This guy, answering the greeting, also greeted his new acquaintance. But suddenly Namgun Sangwa's voice interrupted their moment of silence, as she was angry that he had brought her here for the sake of the landscape. This guy was in a quandary, trying to satisfy both his hostess and socialize with his friends. The only thing that came to his mind was to order something for the table. A few minutes later, the table was set with dishes that looked appetizing, but when the lady saw what was served, she was angry because she didn't consider it a decent meal, and all her anger fell on her friend Jipen. The younger brother, sitting next to him, was a little upset to see his friend in a difficult situation. He felt even worse because he had invited his brother Hejin to the establishment, where complete chaos had ensued. He tried to apologize to his brother, but the young master reassured him, "My brother Peng, don't be nervous. You'd better treat your brother to a drink in honor of his success with the new technique," and he raised his glass. Hearing this, Peng smiled and replied with a sparkle on his face, "Order whatever you want. I'm ready to treat you to anything in this place." The establishment on the riverbank was quite chic and attracted many people with its beauty. But who could have known that one of the mistresses would not like something and would explode in anger, shun her friend and servant, accusing them of their ignorance, trying to calm her down, because everyone was looking at them to avoid being in a shameful position. She was dismissive of others, not considering them full-fledged people, but only comparing them to insects. The hostess's words offended the bar patrons, and everyone began to pay attention to the rude woman. Penn felt anger toward her because she had offended others, including himself. The situation in the bar escalated, and ordinary patrons, witnessing what was happening, began to scatter in different directions. When the lady realized that representatives of the great Paksan Yen clan were looking at her, she just laughed and said that for some time now, the Namgun clan has recognized the Yen clan as one of the 7 great clans. She allowed herself to make insulting comments about the audience, and our hero noted that her words spoiled the taste of the alcohol in his glass, although he did not resort to aggression. Jinping, unable to stand the abuse, got up from his chair. The young master watched him and was amazed at his brother's reaction. He even put down his glass, sensing something unusual in his brother's behavior and the aura of Kai energy that was explosively enveloping him. And Jinping stood firm and would not sit down, as he was furious and wanted to teach this scoundrel a lesson for her words, while his brother Hajin tried to calm him down, but to no avail. Penn abruptly got up from the table and began to shout loudly at the hostess, accusing her of taking too much liberty with her behavior and going too far. These words made the young lady feel delighted because someone had finally made a comment to her, but Peng continued to emphasize that she had violated the rules of etiquette, adding that her actions were unacceptable. "Do you behave with dignity as a representative of the Namgong clan?" asked Peng, clearly indicating her clan affiliation. Hearing these words, the girl just smiled and dove in. After a while, she started laughing out loud, with saliva flying out of her mouth, and she exclaimed, "Do you think you are special because you belong to a big clan?" The laughter was so strong that her stomach hurt, and she grabbed at him, to which Peng reacted by saying that the Namhud clan had nothing to do with it, and she probably wouldn't have gotten a proper education if it weren't for her clan. These words of Peng's made the girl very angry, and she began to look at him as a prey. To demonstrate her strength, she hit the table, releasing energy and smashed it into pieces with a strong blow. Standing in front of him with her servant and a hostile look on her face, she wondered how to punish Pan for his words. After a brief hesitation, she told Pen to his face that she was ready to try him out and check his authenticity. Hearing this, the young master, observing the behavior of his brother and this girl, decided to intervene, advising Pen that if he ever met people like this again in his life, that he can just save his time by ignoring them, and that they can only be fixed by a good spanking, said Hejin. Hearing these words, the girl asked if they had really decided to correct her in this way, by beating her. She aggressively pointed her finger at Pan, showing her servant where to go. She ordered her servant to make them all kneel before her. Hearing this, the servant, who had previously deeply honored her, felt great fear, realizing that he would not be able to fulfill her order. But she slapped him hard, showing him who was in charge. She also told him that if he wanted his family to move freely on her property, he had to quickly lift his buttocks and make them kneel. This servant, holding his head, approached the boys and conveyed her words to them, asking them to obey the order and kneel down. But Hejin, the reincarnated master, had no intention of tolerating such insolence. He grabbed the guy by the head. Holding it, he brought it down, its Kai energy radiating a malevolent force. The master was not going to kill him, but intended to punish him for his insolence. After he held its head firmly, he quickly tossed it aside. And in the flight, he hit him with all his might, making him feel all the guilt he owed him. A strong blow pierced this servant, and he did not get better from this blow. It will be difficult for him to recover. The princess noticed that it was not the boy who knelt down, but her servant, who fainted from this strong blow. She was outraged by such disrespect for her side, and she decided to punish this scoundrel Hedzin herself. This made her very angry, and she rushed to our hero who was calmly waiting for her, saying parasite. The master did not need to prove anything, because he was sure he was right. He took a fighting stance, and waited for her to run up to him. The girl activated her clan's heavenly wind technique, wondering how the guy was going to stop her with his bare hands. She was hoping to break all his bones, but the situation suddenly changed when Hegin's arm shot forward as if controlled by his own energy. She noticed that some energy was wrapping around her arm, completely twisting and blocking its movement. Suddenly, Hejin appeared and was already holding her elbow, preparing to break it. The girl's sudden scream echoed throughout the restaurant where they were. After his attack, the girl held his hand, not understanding how her energy was so suddenly interrupted. But Hejin didn't stop and was preparing to teach her another lesson. He hit her on the supporting leg, and the bones began to break, shattering into pieces, which seriously embarrassed the girl. Now she was lying on the ground, not knowing what to do, as her arm did not work, and her leg was so damaged that she did not even have time to feel how quickly it happened. Her scream and tears echoed throughout the restaurant, and in despair she could not control herself. The girl no longer looked so confident and began to move away on one leg, trying to get away from him. At that time, the young master recalled the precept from his past life, which stated that the insignificance of an injury did not matter until he was harmed. He rushed into attack, tearing his enemies apart. Hearing this, the girl stammered and begged him not to come closer and to stop. All the words he uttered were the commandment of the Emperor of Darkness, which he was in his previous life. Out of pain and frustration, the girl did not know what to say, except to accuse him, calling him a scoundrel, crying in despair. Our hero just watched her suffer, listening to what she would say next, but the girl was not going to stop. She warned him that his clan was not safe, and she said that she would not forget about destroying the entire Baeksangyong clan, which sounded quite cold. But the guy was not afraid of her words. He calmly walked up to her, sat down, took her hand and said, "What are you going to do?" These words made her feel cold inside, and she didn't even know what to say, but the guy continued, "I am asking how you will destroy my clan and me?" At that moment, Genpeng realized that the situation had gone too far, but he could not stop his brother. The girl warned him that if she told her clan what he had done to her, there would be consequences. Suddenly, Heijin kicked all the furniture around him. He picked up a piece of razor-sharp wood. Raising this sharp object above her head, he said, "I'll kill you and bury you, and your clan won't know anything, will they?" Seeing this, the girl began to choke on her tears and screamed, begging for help. But Heijin, feeling excited by his actions, coldly replied, demonstrating that the lesson had been taught to this princess. The next day after the incident, the boys moved to their father's office, waiting for the consequences of their actions. In the office, their father demands an explanation of how it all happened and what exactly happened. He makes tea not only for himself, but also for his naughty children, who have provoked a serious matter with great consequences. Hengjun is sitting at the table, and the aroma of tea fills the room. He tells his father about an argument that led to a fight. The father replies that this answer is just a summary of what happened, and he did not ask for such an explanation. Heejin sits across from his father, and between them sits his younger brother, Jopin, who doesn't know what to say in this situation. Jopin listens to their dialogue in confusion and has nothing to add. He is only nervous about the developments. The father puts a cup of tea on the table and begins to summarize the information he received after the recent clash. The son of the Kanali clan had his face smashed, and the daughter of the Namgun clan had a broken limb. There are rumors in the city that the girl has serious internal injuries and skin damage, and her recovery will take about 6 months. Hyejin's excuse is that the girl wanted them to apologize to her, to which his father replies that this is not an argument. They could have just left. He asks Hyejin to stop acting like a fool, because he knew that such actions could lead to bloodshed between the clans. Our protagonist, not accepting his father's words as final, asks if our clan is really so big that it should make his father panic. Confused by this question, my father asks me what exactly he is talking about. The boy explains that the girl does not consider their family to be a significant clan, and these words deeply hurt his father, as they become a sufficient argument for resentment. Leaving the room, the boy closes the door, not sure whether his dialogue with his father was successful or whether everything will turn out tragically. Although the situation has gone far, he believes that they are not to blame for what happened, although such cruelty is not inherent in Pekto's teachings. The brutality that took place is far from the principles of Pekto, which are the way of the clan and the will of his father. In his previous life, the guy was deeply accustomed to the clan's ways and lived for 30 years as an emperor of darkness. Despite all these little things, he still wonders what to do with the true Azure silk technique. If he were to ask his father about it now, he would most likely be angry. The scene shifts to the Namgongin clan, where a girl who was involved in a recent fight is in the hospital. The doctors carefully bandage the girl's injured parts, trying to change the bandages in a timely manner. She lay motionless, having suffered significant physical and internal damage. In this difficult situation, only her father, the head of the Namgun Ying clan, sympathizes with her. He asks the doctor about her condition and how she feels. The doctor replies that the situation is not as bad as it might seem at first, but the biggest problem is her mental state, as she is experiencing severe psychological trauma. The doctor believes that she was shocked by something, because although physical injuries will heal in 6 months, it will be more difficult to heal the psyche. The head of the clan looks at her thoughtfully, feeling sorry for his daughter in this misunderstanding. At this time, the girl is lying in a hospital room, and it is clear that delusions are haunting her. Suddenly his son comes in, and the doctor bows to him, expressing respect. The son calls out to him, "Hello, father," and the father is happy to see his second son, named Hen. Hen asks his father for his opinion on the situation. The father replied that the serious injuries had weighed her down so much that it hurt him to look at his daughter, and he wanted her to learn and experience the world so much. Heng does not hesitate to tell his father that the incident gave everyone the opportunity to learn from it. However, in his opinion, the bandits should not be forgiven, despite the lessons they could learn. Hyun notes that the fact that he helped her realize the value of life is not the moral of the story. The father cautiously says that the culprit is from the Yen clan, who dared to humiliate his daughter. Hang emphasizes that the Yen clan is only 50 years old, and they have begun to attack the Namgun clan. Hyun asks a question that makes everyone in the room think and be wary. Will the father leave these thugs alone after all? Without hesitation, my father replies that of course he won't. He wants payback. The fact that his child was injured does not mean that he will refuse to challenge this force and clan. Heng reacted with a smile, as he approves of his father's words. Given his position as head of the clan, he cannot act rashly in this situation. After these words, the father asks Hen about the bandit, to which Hen replies that he will definitely take care of him, since the culprit has already been identified and there is no need to hurry. Another question that concerned Hen was when the successor meeting would take place, the date and time. Here we move on to the nocturnal clan Ye. A father informs his youngest son about a meeting of his successors, and he reacts with surprise. After all, the succession meetings, which are attended only by the heirs of the 7 major clans, are intended to bring the clans closer together. He pulls a scroll out of his pocket, hands it to his son, and tells him that he must travel to Hefei in Anhui province on the 15th of this month. At the entrance, he will present this permit, and a squad of hawks will escort him. The Hawk Squad is an elite organization of the Ye clan, and the boy is very surprised that he had to participate in such a gathering and in such an environment. Although he was not happy to accept this permission from his father, he suggested that his older brother should go instead. His father reacted silently and turned his back on him. He wanted to tell the boy that his brother was very dangerous, but John Pan did not immediately understand why he was dangerous, since he was considered a rather good person. The father noticed that his son had changed a lot, and it seems that he was no longer the same person he used to be. The feeling that my father had was so strong that he began to think that he was looking at a completely different person. Illuminated by the night glow under the starry sky, the young master trains hard, using his new abilities. Despite all the obstacles, he realizes that he has to carry the great burden that he is destined to bear in the future. Training becomes an integral part of his life, which will bear great fruit. The former Emperor of Darkness, reincarnated in a new body, tries to catch up with his skills using the knowledge he has. However, his body is increasingly resistant, and does not allow him to show all his strengths. The stick in his hands falls to the ground, and he realizes that he has overdone it. In his training, he has reached the limit. His hands are covered with calluses and burns from the energy. In his previous life, he had a big axe, which he can forget about now because he can't even wield an iron rod. He looks at his bleeding hands and asks himself how long it will take to learn new techniques, but he is not going to give up. Autumn leaves are falling from the trees right on top of him, and he hears the rustling of someone approaching. He straightens up, puts the stick on his shoulder, and waits for the guest. A stranger comes up to me and asks if I've been working out, because the place looks like it's been working out. The boy asks his father why he came, and he replies that he noticed him training hard even at night, which is unusual for him. The boy wipes the blood from his hands and tells his father that he wants to master his staff and spear, but the father sees only a wooden stick in the boy's hands. So he asks what kind of spear and staff he is talking about. When asked if he trains with a sword, the guy says no. This worries his father because the great techniques of their clan are related to the art of the sword, and as the eldest son of the Yen clan, he must master these techniques. However, despite this, the guy has an opinion. He wonders, even if he does master the clan's techniques, what good they are if they don't fit his body. When the father heard his son's words, he did not know what to say, bewildered by how his younger offspring could understand what suited his body. To this, the guy replies that martial arts is what you feel with your body, and if he has found a path that suits his body, he should follow it, feeling the chi energy in his hand with the stick. There's a moment of silence as they both realize that this is partly true, but the father is confused by his son's enthusiasm. My father said nothing more, turned around and was about to leave, but pausing for a second, he said that the Sanguine Guardians had passed him information. The information said that his son Hejin wanted to learn the Azure Silk technique, and it turned out to be true. They all understand that the Azure Silk technique is one of the 5 great divine arts of the clan. Since no one in the clan can learn any of the 5 great divine arts without his permission, he wants to ask his son a question. Our hero listens attentively to his father and is not going to contradict him, but the father adds that his son's answer to his question will determine his decision about this technique. Thus, the son's future and his ability to master the Azure Silk will depend on how he answers his father's questions. At the moment when everything was burning, with corpses lying on the ground and houses being destroyed, The Yen clan was experiencing its last moments of existence. That decisive incident occurred. The enemy soldiers were steadily approaching the clan leader, while their own soldiers sacrificed their lives trying to protect their commander, but all efforts were in vain. One tired knight, exhausted from fighting, fell into the room of his master, his condition reflecting all the horrors of war. The warriors of the clan could not resist the onslaught of the enemies, and the head was sitting in a room with his children. At that critical moment, he decided to pass on the 5 great divine arts to them. Hejin and his brother Jopan were shocked by the information they received from their father, realizing that only in a critical situation could he have taken such a step. Unable to bear the severity of the situation, Jopan told his father that he would also fight for the clan's victory. Information with a guide to the 5 great divine arts was given to our hero, in the hope that he would retain this important information. After his father handed him these valuable books, he headed for the exit. He went to fight in the name of his clan and family. The final phrase before he left was a shouted command to his children to run away, after which the father activated his chi energy, preparing for the last battle. That moment became decisive for the fate of the Yen clan, and the head of the clan fought until the last breath of his life. All his life he had been preparing for this moment. His last team was the Iron Wall Squad, which was supposed to drive out thieves and protect the Yen clan. His children agreed with his plan and believed to the last that everything would happen as he said. The book was passed on to his older brother, who mastered these rare skills. In his new life, standing in the forest, the father decided to ask his son, "How do you know the true Azure silk technique?" was the question posed by the clan leader. The father knew that his son had told the guardians that he had begun training and mastered one of the forms, and wanted to know more. But the boy interrupted him, saying that it was not just about the true Azure silk technique. At this point, my father became seriously tense. The boy told him that he knew all the forms of the 5 great divine arts. The father looked at his younger son and wondered how he could know all this information. But the guy looked him straight in the eye, realizing that he had taught him all these techniques. At that moment, he wanted to tell everything verbatim, how everything happened, and that he was the Emperor of Darkness. About how he was betrayed and killed, and how he woke up in a new body. Also about the impending danger that they were about to face. However, he held back and decided that it was not yet time to tell his father everything. To give his father a decent answer, he said that as a child he was often taken to the martial arts library, and he had some memories from those times. Hearing this answer, the father wondered whether his son was lying or telling the truth. But when he looked his son straight in the eye, he saw that the boy was speaking sincerely and actually knew a lot. However, the father was still worried about why his son was in such a hurry to learn martial arts, and perhaps he had some reason that the father did not know about, which made him think that his son was hiding something. In spite of everything, he listened to his son and told him to come to his office tomorrow morning, where he would help him develop the key energy, which is the key to the true Azure silk. The next morning in the owner's office, they began to work on it. Sitting in the room and focusing his key energy, the father helped his son to gain this power in a short time. The father thought that a crescent moon should be enough to develop his son's key energy. However, at a certain point, he felt something wrong during their session. The energy started to hurt him. He noticed this anomaly and could not understand what was happening. And at the very moment when he was circulating his energy with his son's energy, there was a huge explosion that threw everything in its path. Hayden was filled with dark energy that seemed to have escaped from the demon, and he could not control it. And at that moment, his eyes shone with snow-white light, symbolizing the emergence of the key energy in him. The whole room shone with a completely different gray light on a beautiful sunny day. When the smoke and wind dissipated, the dust began to settle on the floor. My father covered his face, and in the thick fog he could see that. It struck him to the core and raised many more questions. Though it seemed impossible, his son sat unharmed, circulating chi energy completely intact. The time since the start of training has not yet passed, and they have achieved results that usually take months to achieve. After that, he came out of meditation with a deep sigh. This is how their first training day ended. As soon as the moon rose in the evening sky, the boy reported to his father that he was done with his knowledge. His father couldn't help but praise him, because the speed with which he mastered the art was simply incredible. Hearing this, Heejin was amazed that his father praised him. Hyejin, in turn, was happy to train with his father because during this time he was able to feel his father's energy. Despite everything, the father was proud of his son and looked at him not as a weakling, but as a strong warrior. Although the father did not fully understand his son's thoughts and what he was striving for, he could not resist praising him for his very good work. Pride filled him, and he told his son that a gathering of receivers would soon take place. Yesterday he wanted Jipen to go to the meeting, not you. The boy reacted calmly to this. telling his father that he understood and had no questions about it. But the father was shocked that his son did not show interest in this, and did not insist on participating in the event. The guy explained that he did not want to participate in this meeting. After all, who needs a bunch of empty-headed children with excessive pride? And this thought drove the boy to despair. After hearing all this, his father did not persuade him, but sent him away with his brother out of spite. The next day, the horses ran playfully, carrying their owners. Heijin was riding on a cart with grass in his mouth, and his brother was happy that the road was so beautiful. On the opposite side, they noticed a rather small wagon that caught Johnpan's attention because it was moving faster than the big band. And so the boys began their journey. After a month of long travel, they reached Anhui province, riding at the head of their delegation. As they passed through the densely populated streets, they noticed that there were delicious places to eat on the sides. Heijin looked around and realized that he shouldn't be here and wondered why his father had sent him here. Nevertheless, it could have been for the best, because here he could learn the true nature of his enemies. After all, he did not fully understand whether their enemy at that time was a follower of the old teaching or a member of one of the 7 great clans. At the moment they attacked their clan, Heijin knew for sure that their key energy technique matched Pekto's. In addition to their clan, representatives of 6 other families attended this meeting. The thieves who attacked his village did not include members of the Namgung, Mayon, and Tan clans, so he had to keep a close eye on the other 3 clans. He smiled slyly as he realized that among those left behind were the Peng clan, the Meng clan, and of course, the Jungal clan. With that, our story moves to a forest in Anhui province. In the forest of Anhui province, a guy stands behind a tree, and fire envelops him. It seems that someone is attacking him. Suddenly, an unfamiliar object flies in his direction and he tries to dodge it. He successfully dodges it and sees that it was an explosive object that blows up the tree he had just hit. He is being chased by a villain who is trying to blow him up. The impact of an explosive is so powerful that it can blow up trees around it. The thief chasing the boy realizes that he is very fast, and he's even faster than the thief initially thought, which becomes a serious problem for him, as the guy can counterattack at any time. Suddenly, a girl appears and tells the thief that there are a lot of old trees here, and you use reindeer equipment. The thief stands against a backdrop of fire, for which he is responsible. The girl was getting closer and closer to him, seemingly ready for a confrontation. She realizes that he has used up all his supplies and tells him to give her the last bag. The scoundrel wants to stop her and does not understand what she is up to, but she is filled with the energy of Ki. Her body is filled with the power of her acquired talent, and the thief begs her to stop. But she continues anyway and hits him right in the pelvis, which incapacitates the scoundrel and deals him a serious blow. This guy is sent flying by her powerful punch with such speed that he breaks through several trees and stops at the last one. The fire that remained on the battlefield after the villain fled did not go out, and the guy who had just avoided the thief's blow came to the girl's company. He's holding a bag, and it looks like it's the reason they provoked this mess. The girl decides to check what's inside, and the guy gets angry because he's always used as bait. At this point, she ties up her disheveled hair and asks him if he wants his older sister to be safe. If so, he should have been born earlier if he thinks it's unfair. After that, they did everything they wanted to do, and the only thing left to do was to put out all the fire that was left on the battlefield, because they had to do it quickly, because they could be late for the meeting. They were Jengal Zhong and Jengal Ahen, and the meeting they were rushing to was a meeting of receivers. We moved to a wonderful place called Chohong Slu, a famous street where a lot of people have dinner. This public place looked like a restaurant, and there was not a single free seat as all the tables were occupied, and hungry visitors asked for additions. Ahin and June also came to this eatery, excited to have their favorite ramen. The guy was enthusiastically eating his ramen when he suddenly heard a scream. The sound didn't even catch his attention because he didn't care. However, his sister, hearing this sound, could not ignore it, unlike her brother Zhong. She stood up from the table and told him they had to leave. With great speed, she rose up, causing the force of her movement to knock Zhong's ramen right onto his face. Hot ramen was on his head, his clothes absorbed the smell of seasonings, and he did not fully understand why his sister moved forward so quickly. Since Zhong did not hear anything, perhaps the fact that she ran so fast was just her imagination. On the other side of the city, a guy is standing and holding his arm, which hurts a lot after being hit. We see our hero, Heijin, training with this guy and remarking to him that his stable and acquired form is quite good, but it has certain nuances. Heijin holds the stick above him and throws it toward the boy as his weapon. Heijin's voice reminds him that he should act as if this is a real battle. But the guy, catching this stick, realizes that he has used up all his energy. The sweat from the eyelids of this guy, who was at the limit of his strength after intense training, drips directly to the ground. Ahen ran to watch, because she heard the sounds of this training fight from all over the city and wanted to know what was going on. The guy asks Haejin for another chance. He tries to strike, but Haejin is a true master of the unrecognized front, and Jun and Ahyun are sitting next to him in the bushes, watching this spectacle. Even though the guy asked for a second chance, Haejin's blows were very strong. At some points, Haejin activated his chi energy, which made it impossible for the guy to repel his swift blows. Although he dodged Haejin's swings of the stick, he was not yet ready to defeat him. As soon as the young master hit his leg with the stick and he managed to dodge, the stick still caught up with him and hit his body, creating a truly painful sight. Sitting in the bushes, Ahin heard these screams and decided to run. Haejin stood and looked at his opponent, who was crying out in pain from his blow. He was happy that he had managed to do it. His body had finally become much lighter, and his training had paid off. His true Azure silk provided stability in the use of his techniques. He looks at his powerful hands and realizes that soon he will be able to master the martial arts of the four gods, and it will be incredible for him. But his thoughts were interrupted by a man who came to them. This man looked quite old, but he embodied a strong figure as he was the commander of a hawk squad, and his name was Sinamo. Haejin told his commander that he would go to wash after the battle, and that he would leave the guests who were sitting in the bushes watching him to this commander. Shinamo accepted the young master's order, realizing that he was being watched by two spies. He just stood there and did not make any sudden movements, but after a while he said that he could wait all day, so it was better for them to leave kindly. The rustle of leaves was not long in coming. Ahin came out of the bushes, and she stood up because she realized that they had been spotted, and her brother, who was nearby, was impressed by her maneuver. The girl introduced herself to the Hawk's commander and asked for forgiveness, and the reason she came was that she heard screams, and seeing the battle, could not take her eyes off the battle. After a while, she also picked up her clumsy brother, who didn't even know how to react. The Hawk's commander said that it was good that they had confessed, but it was rather impolite to spy. Haejin turned around to see the guests and noticed that they were his old acquaintances, and he could not feel their ki energy well. Ahin, to justify her actions, said that her brother came first, and in the future she would look after him as usual, making him bait. Of course, he got angry with her for talking at him again and ran after her, out of anger. The commander did not react to this, because they were just children. Haejin understood that their human nature and ki energy were different from the thief he had met, but he couldn't jump to conclusions without seeing them in battle, because in the world, even a monk can become a killer. Passing by, the girl noticed that the guy was standing still. Although he stood there, not turning to look at them, she understood that this guy is following them, and they need to be careful with him. Soon it was evening, and something incredible happened over the tavern where people were having dinner. A flame broke out nearby and rose several meters up. People got up from their tables in shock as the nearby explosion smashed furniture and dishes on their tables, frightening them. Pushing each other, they began to run out of the tavern to escape the unknown threat. Smoke from a recent explosion they had feared was rising from a nearby window. Someone's foot stepped on the floor, all enveloped in fire, as if someone was controlling it. A rather unpleasant man, coming out of the circle of the explosion, wrapped in bags of explosives, proceeded to explain who had been mocking his subordinates. The man poured some liquid out of a bag, saying that the person responsible for the previous incident had better come out nicely. Otherwise, he was ready to burn everything here. Ahin and Jun watched this scene from the roof, realizing that the evening's events were continuing. When the boy heard his sister's words, he did not understand what she was talking about, but she quickly explained to him that he was the boss of the guy she had beaten up earlier. She quickly jumped forward, ignoring her brother's words, who suggested that she ask the Yen clan for help. Seeing that Ahin ignored him again and decided to act on her own, he realized that this was very similar to her behavior when she began to land her boot on one of the roofs. It was right above the site of the explosion, and the elusive force of the air kept it aloft. She shouted to the thief that the person who had insulted his servant was already here, and suggested that he stop playing with fire. The man's men noticed that the girl who had caused all this mess had arrived, and they all started shouting that she was up there on the roof. Some of them were glad to see her because they were planning to take her on. His beaten servant with a broken arm noticed the girl and urged his boss to grab her quickly, but the boss struck his subordinate with a powerful blow, showing no sympathy for him. This happened because he could not see the girl properly because of his subordinate. The knocked-down servant fell to the ground, and now nothing prevented the boss from getting a good look at her. The unworthy boss shouted at the girl to come downstairs and they discussed everything, because you have to meet face to face. From the height of the roof, she noticed that the villain used a shadow hand, a technique that, when energy is released into the body of another person, causes severe pain. Therefore, she had to be careful with this rascal. She thought long and hard about coming down, but decided to stay on the roof. Meanwhile, the guys downstairs decided to teach her a lesson and started throwing large amounts of explosives directly in her direction. The boss was not alone, and with his gestures he indicated where to throw the explosives, giving the impression that he was an orchestra conductor. The boss understood that the bags of explosives flying at the girl were very dangerous, and something bad could happen to her after this volley. The bags of explosives were flying directly at the girl, and she did not react immediately, and she might not have managed if not for her brother, who intervened and came to the aid of his sister. By activating the little star technique, he was able to stop the flying bombs, protecting his sister. And he even took them into his own hands, stopping them from acting. After that, with his hands full of goodness, he went down to the ground. But he realized that his technique required a huge amount of energy. Soon he noticed that daggers were stuck in his leg, and his sister was already rushing to help. They were devil's daggers that stabbed right into his body, and the wounds from them bled as if they were charged with some kind of energy. June, feeling sick, started spitting blood on the ground. As soon as the blood hit the ground, a terrible smell rose. And the girl, approaching her brother, realized that it was the smell of poison. The boss, returning the daggers with fresh blood to his hands, assured the girl not to worry, because he has an antidote, and it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, they have to be alive to be sold. And all of this indicated that he adhered to this philosophy and considered himself a great fire lord. Against this background, everything was burning, and the name of this criminal was Manga. When she saw this criminal's horrific attack on her brother, she was filled with rage. She gathered the energy of Kai and prepared to take this antidote away from him by force. Poisonous chaos enveloped the place where people had recently had dinner, and debris could be seen below. Heijin came out of his hotel and saw what was happening. Soon after, his brother ran out of the bedroom, saw the aftermath, and said that he would not inform the Hawk Squad about the fire. In turn, the other clan asked for help, to which Heijin assured them that they should not worry, as the wind was blowing in the other direction and the fire would not spread. In response, his brother told him to help the Jegal clan and to make sure the help was quick. But John Pan looked at his brother and noticed that he did not respond to any of his words. Heijin watched the events closely. His eyes were filled with an unknown power. He watched as Ahin threw herself in a rage at the boss, who had decided to attack the tavern and wanted her to keep going. He wanted her to show him more, to show him her clan's martial art, which he wanted to see so badly. While the girl attacked the rogue boss, he easily dodged her attack. Our hero looked at the flaming flames of the battle and realized that if these people from the Jegal clan had put an end to his native clan in his previous life, only he can feel the power of this energy and sense its origin. The Emperor of Darkness will turn the entire Hebei province into a sea of fire filled with blood. The battle continues as Ahin's failed hit on the boss causes confusion over the city. Smoke fills the streets, and the roar echoes through the buildings. She activates her clan's mysterious technique, suddenly revealing all the cards on the table. The light of her aura illuminates the surrounding shadows. Her opponent, an unworthy fighter, assumes a defensive posture, creating the illusion that he is in control of the battle. He laughs at her efforts, mocking her failures. Knowing the secret of the Jegal clan, he defiantly raises his daggers, condemning the girl for using the Divine First Black Birch technique. Meanwhile, the girl concentrates the energy of the Divine technique, realizing that despite all the obstacles she must hurry, because her brother is on the verge of death. The scoundrel mockingly calls her a heartless sister, pointing to her choice to use the secret technique only after her brother had lost consciousness. His words deeply wound the girl, but she does not let this distract her from her goal. The bandit, in turn, puts his hand on his head, thinking that the girl is actually pitiful, and prepares to end her short life. Ahin throws a leg kick, looking to hurt his opponent. However, the boss is not in charge of his organization for nothing, as his strength makes it easy to parry its blows, confirming his dominance in the battle. In a moment he throws a volley of his sharp daggers, which are generously coated with poison, at her. The daggers fly in the girl's direction but do not hit her due to her incredible agility. Accumulating the energy of the divine technique, Ahin rushes forward, her aura shining, forming a powerful punch. This blow is meant to meet the ugly face of a cunning rogue. She activates the palm of the minor star technique, and her blow penetrates the boss's body. He stumbled backwards from the blow, his legs gave out and he stopped. Although she hit him hard, the boss seemed completely indifferent to the injury. She is confident that she executed the stroke flawlessly, feeling that she has achieved her goal. However, the villain did not fall, so she decides to attack again. There was no time to hesitate, she had to act quickly. Rising up decisively, she heads towards her enemy again. Suddenly, a sharp dagger appears out of nowhere and flies straight at her. She sees the dagger glowing with red chi energy. With the speed of light, she turns away, avoiding the blow, and thus prolongs her life for some time. Although she does not understand how it happened. She cannot understand how, after her powerful blow, this old scoundrel is still on his feet and seems to magically throw a dagger at her. She decides to step back to a safe distance to analyze the situation again, because everything happened too suddenly. Against the backdrop of his burning boss, who is spewing blood, he tells her that her punch was not bad, and that it even seemed to hurt him. The Fire Lord's rage is overwhelming, and he furiously seeks to tear the girl to pieces, attacking her with his treacherous daggers. Activating all her strength to avoid them, she tries not to fall for his hook. She even has to deflect daggers, because there are so many of them. But her technique is also powerful, and she can break daggers into pieces with her divine chi energy. But with each lowering of the demonic technique, this Fire Lord adds his up-close attack, increasing the pressure on the girl. In a fierce fight, they clash, and he hits the girl on the arm with his burning foot. The blow was cruel and burning, and the girl felt its full force piercing her body. But she wasn't going to give up. She grabbed his leg with one hand and decided to strike him with the other. Her fist flew straight into his face, and she hoped that this blow would be fatal for him. After his fist collided with the scoundrel's face, he received enough injuries that could have made him a better person. But despite this, he stayed on his feet, effectively defending and counterattacking. The scoundrel moved away to a comfortable distance and saw that the girl was already tired and starting to fall. He hoped that she would not be able to hold out for long using her technique. After all, her martial art was very powerful and difficult for her, making her easy prey for the enemy. And as she held onto her body and her energy was already fading, she realized that the situation was getting worse. Suddenly, the boss reminds his subordinates to stop wasting time and start attacking the girl, aiming to capture her. A crowd of barbarians begins to surround her. Her strength begins to leave her, and she realizes that she cannot cope with them alone. What hurts her the most is the realization that all this happened because of her, and her brother may never wake up. This moonlit night is bathed in fiery light, creating a menacing atmosphere. Our hero stands aside, observing the technique used by the girl but does not rush to help her. But suddenly her brother, John Pan, cannot stand to see such lawlessness and jumps into the fray. He decides to help her, despite the danger. Heejin looks at him and realizes that he needs to support his brother. He exhales, catching himself thinking that he feels something strange. This unusual sensation haunts him, and perhaps it can reveal something mysterious to him. But he had no time to think. He picked up his wooden staff, preparing for action. He raises his staff above him like a spear, aiming at the enemy. His task is to throw and hit the villain in order to intervene in the battle. Activating his energy, he throws his staff into the crowd of scoundrels. At this point, a bunch of barbarians are furiously destroying everything in their path. One of the punches hits Ahin's body right on the spot. Falling to the ground, she kneels down and realizes that her strength is leaving her. At this point, she thinks that her life could end in such an unpleasant place. The bandits surrounded her and laugh, remembering how she used to move nimbly, and now it seems that everything is over for her. One of the bandits, seeing the helpless girl, thought to use the situation to his advantage and asked his commander for permission. But at the same time, with great force, the staff flies and cuts off his head, stopping his terrible thoughts. The girl who saw this incredible sight did not understand who had taken her side, and the face of the murdered villain was covered in blood. When the bandit fell, everyone held their breath, trying to understand what had happened. Our hero emerges from the thick smoke that enveloped the chaos. The bandits were distracted by the brutal beheading of their fellow soldier, and it is clear that they cannot leave this unanswered. The guy, realizing the possible consequences of his interference in the battle, silently goes forward. One of the bandits looks at him and asks who he is, who could do such a thing. The girl, in turn, looks at the young master of the Pek Sanyan clan, noticing his strong figure. She understands that he was not afraid to intervene in the fight, but the main question that worries her is why he helps her and why he looks at her so coldly. One of the soldiers, who was holding a mace-like weapon on his shoulder, approached Hejin. He was running closer and closer to remind Hejin of a very important thing that he might not have known. When the boss asks you a question, you have to answer quickly, and he wanted to force Hejin to answer. But a minute later, the warrior falls to the ground, burned to death. His weapon falls and rolls to the feet of the guy, who bends down to pick it up. The crowd of bandits stands and stares in disbelief at what has happened, but their comrade is lying on the ground, and his weapon is now in the boy's hands. Of course, they don't intend to let it go and surround him, ready to attack. Some have claws, some have swords, some have sabers, and it all comes down on Hejin. But what did he do to kill their comrade without even touching him? Hejin takes a fighting stance and the asphalt breaks under him. The boss of these bandits shouts to his army to stop him at any cost. The calm guy instantly doubles in the eyes of the bandits, almost like an illusion. With incredible speed, Holding a mace in his hands, he rushes in different directions to scatter these miserable scoundrels. He mercilessly beats them, smashing their ugly faces, thus making the world a little better. Although he did not really like helping this girl, he realizes that he will learn nothing if she just dies. Holding the weapon he took from the bandits, he scatters a pile of bodies of these scoundrels in different directions, and no one can hurt him, and the bones of the bandits crunch like crackers. With their arms twisted and at best alive, they remain on the battlefield, all destroyed. And the Lord of Fire instantly turns pale and feels sick, because he is facing a guy with unknown power. In 1 minute, he had killed his entire army, and as soon as the last soldier fell unconscious, Heijin stands there, concentrating his ki energy, which scares the boss to the bone. Even the fire that was burning in that direction falls silent under the power of this guy. The boss simply doesn't know how to react, because all his soldiers are dead, and he only hit vulnerable spots. At this point, he realizes that he cannot afford to relax, because he is not just a girl. He activates his devilish daggers of fire. He picks them up in his hands and addresses the guy with a question on his lips. "Who the hell are you?" Meanwhile, Heijin approaches the girl he rescued. She is in a state of shock and cannot find the words to express her gratitude. Our hero takes her hand and squeezes it hard. He is standing next to her, and his chakra seems to merge with her body, causing the girl pain, which makes her scream. But the guy tells her, "Shut up." But he thinks to himself that she should show him the real energy of ki. And as soon as she stops talking for a few seconds, his power begins to penetrate her body. The guy feels that something is wrong with her because he realizes that her energy is actually hostile. He wonders if the girl is really his enemy, like her entire clan. Having felt everything he wanted, he even gets a little angry. He casually throws her hand aside and prepares to say something. I wanted her to take care of her younger brother while he was the boss. The girl wants to tell him that he probably doesn't know who he's facing, because the boss's main weapon is poisoned daggers, and one scratch can lead to death. Heijin stands in front of her and reminds her that he is not going to put up with her for long, and asks her if she heard what he said. With an incredibly cold and angry energy, he turns to her and rudely tells her to get lost, as she is only in the way. When she saw how she was answered and felt the cold on her skin, she found no words in response. All she has to do is shut up, take her brother and drag him to safety. The gangster's boss is watching all this closely and decides to intervene, seeing whether the boy has finished his family showdown. The bandit noticed that the boy was only pretending to be strong in front of the girl, and that he was not really a threat, to which the guy replied that his art of the Silent Red tribe was rather insignificant. The bandit was impressed by his knowledge, because no one knew about his clan or his technique. This infuriated the bandit, because how could this miserable guy know about his technique? But our hero took the mace, twirled it in front of him, standing in a stance, and told the bandit that he was going to ask him a question that he would have to answer. What kind of technique he was using. We move to a girl carrying her unconscious brother under a moonlit night sky. She thinks he's getting worse and worse, but she can't get the thought of how the clan guy treated her and drove her crazy out of her mind. She promises that next time she will make him her debtor, as this arrogant eldest son of the clan has humiliated her. There was also a hawk squad in the yard, and the commander told Jippin's brother that they had extinguished the fire at the southwest gate. He wanted to ask him if they should help Master Kojin in this situation. Jippin's brother hesitantly surveys the situation, wondering whether their help is really needed in this conflict, or whether Hojin can handle the consequences himself. Japan could not even respond with a word, because in this situation he had nothing to say. The Hawk's commander was looking at him at that moment, trying to reach him. He looked around, seeing the corpses of these scoundrels lying on the ground. Heijin's fight with the boss was so powerful that support seemed unnecessary. His brother Joe Pan said he didn't think Heijin needed help, while a fight was going on in the background. It was a fight from which only one would come out alive, and the bandit boss already felt his doom. The moment Heijin attacked him, and not just with cold hands. It was also sharp and had a mace that could knock the spirit out of him with a single blow. And so it happened that the bandit missed one shot from our hero. It was so strong and accurate that the bandit's teeth shattered into pieces. For a few seconds, he regained consciousness, but he still had the dagger in his hand. Although he was beaten almost to death, he still counterattacked, shooting from under our hero's feet. This dagger flew past Heijin without even hitting him. He flies over the enemy, does a flip, and in an incredible maneuver ends up behind the enemy. The boss, the Fire Lord, was amazed by this maneuver and couldn't even react in time. But a second later, a heavy mace flew straight into his back. The blow seriously shattered his limbs, and he was even on the verge of giving up. But in this battle, someone had to die, and he decided to tell the guy that he needed to end this nonsense and send Heijin to the next world. In turn, our hero told him that he was the most boring fighter, and he was not even interested in fighting him. And, without saying a word, he did not use the art of the Silent Red Tribe or the Silent God of the Left, which he really wanted to look at. After analyzing the situation, our hero realized that the bandit was only using his technique to strengthen his daggers, while the technique itself is the strongest in the world, and he shouldn't waste it so recklessly. The bandit was tense, but our hero continued to shame him, calling him a liar, because although he calls himself the Lord of Fire, his attacks do not contain a single drop of fire energy, and he does not deserve this title. The guy even doubts that the bandit has actually learned the technique of the silent leftist god. And these words, like a knife in the heart, deeply hurt the bandit, making him very angry. It was a special psychological attack on the stupid bandit, who was so enraged that he decided to demonstrate the art of the Silent Red Tribe in real life to this guy. The guy recalls how in his previous life, in one of the cold caves, he learned about the Four Gods technique, which began with the divine energy of the North. He asked the old man why it was necessary to start studying with this energy, and the old man begins to punch a hole in the rock with his finger. After its energy ceases to work, he pulls his finger out, leaving a precise hole in the rock. The old man says that the energy of the water god is the hardest of the four gods, but also the softest. It is capable of setting up battering rams and artillery, and raising his hand, the old man wants to show him another trick. Touching the wall with his hand, a wave comes out of it, as if in water, the old man demonstrates. Then he starts doing incredible things with his own hand. He draws as if with a laser on a stone rock. This technique allows you to improve the martial arts you have already learned. His hands continue to draw something on the rock, using energy. A minute later, he drew a picture depicting the Box of the North, the water god Kiahi. Heejin asks him if he wants to awaken the power of the four gods, what he needs to do. To which the old man replies that, to tell the truth, he is not yet at that stage of development. He says that you need to use the intention to kill and the morale of the enemy. We cut to the battlefield, where Heijin uses the infernal flames of evil to fight the bandits, driving them mad, all of which was premeditated to summon the energy of God in the battle. The bandit boss grits his teeth, energy filling every corner of his body. In an instant, his muscles grow bigger and his body is enveloped in flames, all to show the boy his place. He throws away the daggers he used to prioritize, and he rushes into the attack without them, because he no longer needs them. His strength is off the charts, and the guy is standing there calmly waiting for his attack. For him, it's all very boring, and he doesn't show any emotion of sadness or fear on his face. He sees his boss in front of him, burning with the flames of the so-called unconditional Red Tribe technique. But it still doesn't impress our hero, as he easily dodges all attacks. Like a child playing with a ball, he is playing with this scoundrel. The blows are strong, but at the same time weak for the beating Emperor of Darkness. He mocks the warrior and tells him that even an anthill cannot be stopped by such fire. And this rascal makes him laugh. "Don't you have any other talents?" he mocks. The gangster's boss can't find a place to sit, as he has never heard such abuse before. He promises to burn everything around him. From inside Heijin and all around him, the power gets out of control, and his inner demon breaks free. Filling the situation with more rage and more fire, the relationship with the guy heats up to the limit. The impact flies past Heijin with great speed and force, destroying trees and walls. But after a strong blow broke off against a tree, leaving a mark there, the strength began to fade. The gangster did all this to see the guy's reaction, which was smiling. Not only does he use all his strength, but in another situation he is also laughed at. A tornado of fire descends on the boy, who skillfully continues to avoid it. He seems to ignore this fight, not allowing the boss to catch him and strike. This makes the boss angry, and makes him attack harder and harder. But all he wants is to exhaust the enemy's forces and find their vulnerabilities. He even throws the mace out of his hands while prolonging the intrigue and dodging attacks. At this point, the boss thinks he's found his weak spot and catches him, trying to catch the guy with his huge fire hand to kill him. And he in turn catches it with his bare hand, and they cross their arms. Even though the boss thought he was going to kill him and caught what he thought was a stupid bastard. Holding his hand, the boss was already planning how he would kill him, starting with breaking all his bones. He was already laughing, imagining the guy's corpse in front of him, but suddenly he smells the energy of water that appeared in the air. His fiery hand begins to extinguish, and steam begins to rise from his hand. The shocked boss does not understand where this steam came from or how it is possible, but a second later he realizes that his feet are up to his knees in water. He looks at the water rising up. The water rises and extinguishes all the fire of his technique and power. Not understanding what the hell happened and how it happened, he starts to get nervous. And now we see that the guy is holding his hand, and everything around them is surrounded by a shell-like energy, and they are as if in water, although they are not in water. And suddenly the technique of the great god disappeared. This made the boss realize that things had not gone according to plan, and his face changed dramatically. But how exactly was the boy able to awaken the water god, the ruler of the north? The energy was so powerful that it began to rain from the sky. In front of the Fire Lord stood a huge god of water, a mythical creature in the form of a turtle with a snake, symbolizing the god who protects the north and one of the 4 directions of the world. Henma. The boss realizes that all his techniques are useless. The fire in his demonic hands no longer ignites. It seemed that in an incredible way his technique was completely absorbed. This overload causes blood to flow from his nostrils and mouth. He does not give up and shouting "son of a bitch" at the guy, tries to somehow. He asks the guy what he has done with his energy, and at the same time tries to hit him. Although the fire had not yet died down over the tavern, it was only gaining strength. The body of the culprit of this party was thrown on the ground from strong blows. The guy approaches the body of his boss, who is lying exhausted on the ground, and thanks him. His gratitude is that thanks to his boss he was able to awaken God Henma. The bandit in turn begs for mercy, lying on the ground and promising the boy mountains of gold for his mercy. But our hero, looking directly into the eyes of this scoundrel, tells him that he can play with his favorite fire. Coming closer, he directs his hands, accumulating all the energy near the subdued body of the scoundrel. A munition strike flies right into the face of this disgusting boss. The blow hits him right in the middle of the fire, over which he can no longer exercise control. And at that moment, his body began to burn like never before, and the Lord of Fire was defeated. The last thing he sees before he dies is the silhouette of a boy, and his scream fills the streets of the city, destroying everything in its path and taking the villain with it. The boy watches everything with extreme curiosity, cold and sophisticated. Suddenly, his brother Jin Peng approaches him, unable to say a word as he stares at his brother in shock and does not recognize him. The next day after the battle, the air at the tavern was filled with the smell of burning, but there was no more fire. People gathered to rebuild what had been destroyed. The builders worked tirelessly to restore the destroyed building, and surprisingly, the walls were not so badly damaged. One construction worker tells another that a gentleman from the Yen clan personally caught the arsonist. As the builder was hammering in a nail, a smelly guy approached him and asked him to tell us about the incident, to which the builder replied that he had not only caught the arsonist, but had burned him to the ground. Smelling the boy's stench, the builder waved him away. But the boy did not believe him, because he could not imagine that a young gentleman from a respectable clan was capable of such a thing. Suddenly, a boss ran up to them. He opened his arms and wanted to hug the guy, who was flying over him from the stench, welcoming him and saying that he had heard about his journey here. Approaching him, he took him by the hand and said that if they hadn't contacted him in advance, he would have been killed. They would have freed up all their time and schedule for him, said a respectable man who was a member of a well-known nobility. But this scruffy guy says that since they are just beggars, maybe they can try to take time away from the Lord of the Thorny Melody Pavilion. He asks how the repairs are going, and is told that the work is progressing well and quickly, thanks to the efforts of the Poor People's Sect. Then this unkempt man says that if they have any difficulties, they can contact him at any time, and then leaves the construction site. The construction workers are surprised by the man's status, as he looks like a complete homeless person. The official explains that this is the man who hired them to help with the Thorny Melody Pavilion. The construction workers looked at his figure and could not believe that this man could afford something so impressive, even though he had enough money. It turns out to be the successor to the organization of the White Islands faction. When he stepped away from the construction site and learned of the rumors, he was amazed at how easily the boy had defeated Bang, one of the 13 strongest in the Black Islands faction. He is curious and wants to see with his own eyes who this young gentleman from the Yen clan is. And, enthusiastic, spreading his wings, he rushes to the city of the meeting of his successors, where he is going to engage in his begging. The sounds of training can be heard in the deep forest. As always, Henjin practices by practicing his techniques. He hit the tree, making a hole using the Shuan Guardian technique, which specializes in defense. Proper use of the power of direction can turn this martial art into a powerful offensive tool. This Shuan Guardian art is also effective in clearing turbid chi. Since ancient times, it has been said that if the Shuan Guardian is strong, then your body will not have much turbid chi. Suddenly his thoughts were interrupted by a team of hawks. They report that they have finished their training to the young master. At this point, Hyunjin wonders what is happening to Jipping. The hawks commander said that Jippen wanted to fight a little by himself. The guy couldn't believe his ears, because it didn't look like a jeepney. But suddenly he strained his eyesight and noticed one of the men. In this circle of swordsmen, there was a certain incomprehensible atmosphere. A girl came out from the side, and it was her again. Hejin said, "If you've recovered, then come back to the clan." but she tried to stop him by grabbing his clothes. She had some questions for him and wanted to ask him. At that time, his brother was sitting in a tree. It was hard for him to understand it all. He breathed slowly, trying to calm down. From his high place, he wondered if he really knew his brother well. But at the last moment, something happened to his brother that he could not even recognize him. The image of his brother kept coming back to him, and he wondered if he was wrong. But suddenly his loneliness was broken by Heejin and Ahin. He didn't expect to see them, but they were walking alongside him, discussing something, and didn't notice John Pan. Looking at them, he wondered if he was doing the right thing by listening to their conversations. The dark side tells him that in his place he would have done the same, but the white side restrains him, saying that this is not the right thing to do. However, he jumps out of the tree, apologizing to his good side. For him, it's not honor that matters, but curiosity. Heijin and the girl stop in a deep forest, convinced that no one will hear them. The guy asks what she wants from him. The girl takes his hand and begins to materialize the energy, which takes the form of a ball. This is the technique of the divine first black birch. For her, it is important that her punch is filled with energy that penetrates the belly of Bang, the Lord of Fire. However, her technique does not cause him any damage, and even he does not feel pain from it. Although he had so easily defeated him with his wood chi energy, our hero had not yet fully understood it. He filled his lungs with the fresh air of the magical forest, noting that the light and soft refreshing scent of her CI smells like birch. But on the other hand, everything turned out to be far from so friendly. The martial art of that irresponsible type is the path of a silent alliance that masters the fiery chi that burns everything in its path. And he asked the girl a question. What does she think will happen if you throw fire into the wood? Will it catch fire? For him, this opponent is not the best choice for this girl. And when she realized this, her heart sank in disappointment. She realized that she could not even imagine that this could be due to the different energies of chi. Although she received an answer to her question, her curiosity did not fade, and she wanted to ask another. However, it seemed that the guy, standing there in silence, did not realize how tough it was. The girl clarified that she was referring to the irresponsible guy he had burned to death. Because that irresponsible guy had called himself the Lord of Fire and Lightning, and the guy had mockingly burned him in his own fire. When asked why it was so cruel, the girl replied that a normal person probably couldn't do that, and everyone who saw the scene must have been shocked. And immediately after these words, the boy realized why his brother, Jin Pan, wanted to be alone with him, and why there had been such tension in his brigade in his presence before. Since it was the territory of the white faction of the islands, and his actions were similar to those of the Dark Emperor, it was unacceptable from the point of view of the norms he followed. But despite this, he smiled and decided to forgive himself. By telling the girl that he could have killed you and your brother, and that he was a real criminal, he first started the fire. And in the face of danger to the lives of a large number of people, why should he feel sorry for someone like him? The girl could not disagree, because death is really fair. Whether you are a good person or a bad person, death will meet you anyway. But should the method of killing differ from good to bad people? According to our hero, thieves should die in agony. This is what he considers just, fair, and righteous. And at that moment, the girl simply could not say anything more. She looked at the boy, wondering how old he was, and I think he looked like he was her age, but he thought like her father's age. There was one important detail that Ahen noticed. His aura was like that of an older man. But despite this, the boy explains to her that he is only 18. Then the girl asks why he always looks so gloomy, as if he has already lived at least 2 lives. At these words, the guy reluctantly understands the essence of her joke. He is silent, but the thought flashes through his mind that one day his brother will understand everything. Despite all this, he continues to receive help from this man, and the thought of him standing over her brother, who was smoldering from the poison the scoundrel had poured into him, remains in his memory. The girl who wants to leave him says she hates him with all her might, but the guy insists that she do something to get her brother back and make amends. But she slyly tells him to fuck off, noting that she is a year older than him, and urges him to treat her like an older sister, to which the hero simply remains silent. 2 days later, at a meeting of the successors in the city of Einhen, everything was ready for the ceremony, and the brothers, accompanied by Hawks, arrived on time and in full force. The Hawks commander emphasized that they were there, and that they would dismount from their horses. Lizzie was the first to dismount and come to the door. He started knocking and said, "If there is someone here, please open the door." After a minute of waiting, the door opened, and it became clear that people were waiting there. There was a fat man in the center, with his men around him. He asked if it was the Green Mountain clan, and he was interested in this question. The Hawks commander replied that everything was correct, and that he was Shin Mo, responsible for the escort. The fat man introduced himself as Han Mon of the Sinchuan clan. saying that he was honored to meet the warriors of the Yen clan. Since Sungjong is the steel poison dragon of the Hahoman clan, the boy looks at this man and realizes that the person behind him is very familiar to him. He realizes that he has seen this person's face before. For obvious reasons, he didn't like his expressionless face, and he's not sure if this man is really from the Tang clan. According to our hero, this person looks like someone he has already met, but he cannot pinpoint exactly where and when it happened. Just by looking at this guy's face, Heejin immediately realized that this was the guy in his past life who had used a special technique to defeat him at the most unexpected moment. His energy pierced through Heejin's heart, taking his life and forcing him to be reborn when he was still young. Our hero grabbed his heart, and his memories haunted him. He has to take revenge on Quan for the betrayal that happened at one of the most crucial moments of his life. Heejin looks around the crowd and recognizes the fat man's son as the same scoundrel who left him dead in the past. As the delegation approaches, the Hawk Squad leader introduces the young clan master Yen Hojin and his brother Zhong Peng as outstanding warriors of their guild. At this time, the head of the Dragon clan notes that he has heard a lot about them. The master of the clan waves his hand, asking which of them is the other young master, because he has heard that the other is an impressive and talented left-handed man. His blunt statement caused tension among everyone in the delegation, especially when the Hawks commander mentions John Pan. The outraged commander asks them to observe etiquette as they are the leaders of the Shin Squad. However, the young master is not going to respond to provocations. He goes ahead of everyone and invites everyone to eat and satisfy themselves, because he is hungry. This dinner invitation turned out to be a much better offer than conflict resolution, and the Yen clan, despite leader Shin, is moving forward without a single glance back. The leader of the Shin clan watches the people passing by and realizes that he has been treated just as rudely. He stands next to his son, watching as they are completely ignored. Heejin has been rude, but his son remarks that despite his appearance, he has enough courage. A young man named Yang San from the Sich Yuan Tang clan looks at Heejin with excitement, realizing that he has allowed himself too much in relation to the Tang clan. He watches the departing Yen clan delegation with interest, analyzing how the upcoming meeting between the heirs will develop. On this note, we move forward 2 days to the heirs' banquet hall. In one of the courtyards, 2 large men greet their old acquaintance, who in their opinion, has become incredibly beautiful. They are surprised how long it has been since they last met. Heejin looks in front of him and sees representatives of the Peng clan, which had recently conquered Hefei. They are dressed in red and white and look quite confident. The girl who is talking to them notices that they have gained weight because, as they explain, they eat a lot. Our hero, watching them in the banquet hall, recalls that he saw them a few days ago. At the moment he greeted them, they squeezed his hand tightly. With a smile, they introduced themselves as Daeho and shook Heijin's hand for a long time, saying that they were pleased to meet him. During this time, our hero managed to study their internal chi energy, which was different from the energy of the criminals he was looking for. And the girl who talked to them was Lan Moen's daughter, and she felt insecure in front of such strong men. Thinking back to his previous life, Heijin recalls the Moen clan and the old man who was its leader and ambushed him in the Commonwealth. It was when he was resting by a stone that this old man stabbed him in the heart, but that was in his previous life, and there is no such threat now. Heijin doesn't need to be distracted by these trifles, especially at a time like this. Despite the past, there's only one clan he hasn't checked out yet. This is the Mean clan. Will Heijin feel their power? During the banquet, he carefully analyzes all the representatives, but there is no one from the Moen clan among them. From a distance, a girl with lush hair is watching him, actively searching for Heijin. Suddenly, she spots him in the crowd and is surprised to realize that she has finally found the one she was looking for. This beautiful girl causes confusion among those around her when they see her devoted pursuit of finding Heijin. Meanwhile, a guy named Hen from the Namgan clan enjoys alcohol and flirts with girls, inviting them to spend time together. As soon as Hen wanted to say something to the girls, he noticed a beautiful girl. Immediately after he saw her, he could not look away because he had not seen her for so many years. He left the beautiful ladies in his entourage and went to her. As he approached, he noticed that she began to greet and flirt with someone else. At that moment, the girl approached Heijin, who recognized her and said, "You again?" The girl replied, "Not for 2 days." Hyun, watching the girl happily greet Heijin, felt embarrassed. And when Heijin asked her to stop following him because he was busy, Hyun was extremely disappointed. Hyun wondered why such a beautiful girl from a famous clan was hanging out with this scoundrel, Heijin. 10 minutes later, the girl invited Heijin to have a bite to eat. They found a great place and started talking. She was amazed at the power of the Yen clan's martial arts. Yejin replied that this was not a reason to brag, and despite his mastery of the technique, he needed to become stronger. The girl praised his modesty. She realized that he was already strong, but Heejin wanted to become the strongest in the world. His words impressed the girl. "It's better to strive for perfection than to be content with mediocrity," he said, as Hen watched them from the sidelines. Hearing this phrase, Hung realized that their Namgon clan was the closest to being the strongest in the world. Heejin and the girl continued their dialogue. Heejin said that no one in the world can be invincible, and everyone has the ability to constantly improve. The girl agreed with him, but noted that there is one man in the world who can actually be called the strongest in the whole world. She remembered the emperor of the 4 battlefields, who could do incredible things and stood in her imagination on a mountain of corpses of his enemies. "He is a legendary warrior who led a blood religion 300 years ago," she says. Heejin laughed at these words because his name sounded a bit childish. According to legend, the emperor of the 4 martial arts wanted to be called the strongest in the world because he had mastered the 4 main martial arts that allowed him to attack, defend, and evade as effectively as possible. "He's so powerful that he even conquered the Golden Dragon and was named the Golden Dragon Emperor," she added. The girl folded her arms and said that she still considered it too enthusiastic a view of things. But Heejin understood that attack, defense, and evasion, as well as the 4 martial arts styles, were descriptions of the techniques of the 4 guardian gods. Moreover, the Golden Dragon Chi is the highest form of the 4 dragon gods' techniques. He stood up, realizing that perhaps the emperor of the 4 battle directions had inherited the technique of the 4 guardian gods. As soon as he stood up, the guy from the dragon clan we saw earlier approached them. He wondered how they were having such a great time. He quickly looked around and saw an empty chair nearby. He brazenly moved toward them and sat down next to a beautiful girl, trying to join their company. However, their social circle was not ready to accept this guy. They did not want to talk to him, but his confidence and insolence made their communication uncomfortable. The girl, sitting up straight, did not know what to say to him. However, recognizing him, she allowed him to stay. And now the 3 of them are sitting at the same table, but the dialogue between them somehow doesn't work. The girl decided to defuse the situation and introduce the guy sitting across from her, but the Dragon Clan representative already knew who he was. He continues his address, stating that he did not come here to meet people, and he is actively trying to ignore Heejin. The girl looks at this guy and feels as if she has stepped on something unpleasant. A guy puts his cup on the table and demands that the girl pour him tea. She accepts his request with a look of consent, but in reality has no intention of pouring him anything. Then he suddenly throws his glass at her with a slight click. The glass flies toward her, but she deftly sends it back in his direction. Still smiling, she says, "Pour yourself some tea." But the guy insists that she pour it anyway. The girl continues to refuse and defends her position, rejecting his requests. He points his finger at Heejin and says that she just poured tea for this guy. But the girl realizes that Heejin is her friend. Kwon tries to stop his cheeky jokes. He tells the girl that he can also become her friend, but she notices that he is too rude and rejects his attempts. At that moment they understood each other, but no one dared to be rude. Kunan noticed how the girl shone, and it made him burn with envy. Ahen just smiled at him and hoped that Kunan would leave soon, realizing that no one appreciated him here. Kwon raised the glass above his head and addressed the girl. "You're very nice, which makes you different from other girls who are submissive and boring." Hen did not understand what he was getting at, but these words aroused her suspicions. At that moment, her friend Hen, who was observing the situation, came up to Kunan from behind and told him to stop it. "It's not a good idea to interfere in people's relationships, just get up and walk away," said Hung. Kunan saw Heng behind him and warned him not to stand behind him because he was from the Strongtang clan and his own safety was important to him. But Heng represented the Namgal clan. Suddenly, a representative of the Dragon Clan rose from his chair. He stood up and looked directly into Hen's eyes, telling him that the King of Swords was in no way equal to the Heavenly King. But Hen, in turn, did not understand who he was talking about. Heejin watches these 2 competing boys and thinks about how they are like little kids, competing to see who is cooler. Each of them is trying to prove that they are the strongest in the world, creating a fuss out of nothing. Suddenly, a 3rd man intervenes in their argument with a mocking remark about how idiots think they are the strongest. He declares that in the presence of the Mean clan, they are all nothing. The people around him, watching this scene, were surprised to hear the appearance of this new man. Hyejin feels his hand tremble as he realizes who this man is. The 3rd young master of the Mean clan, named Horim, appears out of the blue and declares that they are not worthy of being called the stronger clan in the presence of the real clans. This guy comes out of nowhere. No one has ever seen him before. He descends the stairs, an aura of strength and chi energy blowing behind him. People attending the ceremony cannot take their eyes off his movements. They are so impressed by his appearance. Horim looked so powerful that his appearance at the very moment when the boys were arguing made a strong impression. When Hyun noticed Horim, he fell silent, and Horim remarked that they could be stronger if they were from the Nimgal or Moen clan. Standing next to the table, he looked at the two boys with contempt, as if they were no better than garbage. He said he could recognize all these clans as strong, but the Tang clan was just a joke to him. The representative of the Dragon clan, hearing these words, burst into anger. Outraged by such a disrespectful attitude, an acute tension arose between them, and no one could predict what would happen next. The guy was waiting for Horim to apologize and asked him again to clarify whether he had really said that. Horim just smiled and replied that he shouldn't talk so lightly about who is the strongest in the world. Kunan, unable to contain his anger, was clearly furious, which was evident to everyone present. Horim, in turn, told him that he was demonstrating his weakness by allowing himself to get angry so easily and advised him to calm down. But it was too late. The chi energy began to fill every cell of the boy's body, and his entire aura glowed from the chakra. Without hesitation, he looks at the Tang clan with pride and rushes to attack Horim. The girl, seeing that a real massacre is about to take place, wants to protect her friend Hagen, who accidentally finds himself between the two fighters. But suddenly the cup flew through the air like a bullet and hit someone. The glass hit Horim in the hand, poured water over him, and shattered into pieces. Horim picks up the shards and looks at them in surprise, not understanding how the cup could have hit his hand so quickly. Kunan is outraged, thinking of the one who had undignifiedly interfered with their dialogue. Meanwhile, Heejin, sitting still at the table, distracted the two quarrelsome men. Holding his hand, he raised it up and apologized, saying it was his mistake. Horim smiled when he heard the word mistake from Heejin. Holding the glass shards, Horim could not believe it was a mistake. He was sure it was a deliberate attack. When Hyejin makes eye contact with Horim, he realizes that he is trying to provoke him. Their eyes locked, and Hyejin behaved with dignity, not showing his weakness. Horim suddenly started laughing, saying that Hyejin was such a funny young man. He asks with interest which clan Hyejin is a member of, but our hero refuses to answer his questions. Hyejin advised Horim to focus on the person he was dealing with, and everyone present turned their attention to Kunan. Kunan, burning with hatred, radiates the chakra that comes from him. He shouts at Hyejin, "Hey, you bastard from the Yen clan, if you're so easily interfering in our showdown, then I'll kill you first!" And with great hatred and a demonstration of energy, Kunan runs at our hero. And Hyejin just sits there and doesn't bother anyone. And no one understands why everyone is trying so hard to get him. Coming closer, Kunan asks Hyejin if he is ready to die. At this point, he threatens Hyejin, saying that he will not even be left with a wet spot, and how he will be torn apart. But Hyejin does not seem to care. And suddenly, a second after Kunan shouted insults at the Yen clan, a glass hits his head, humiliating him. The impact of the glass caused him to lose consciousness. He was dizzy, and this saved him from further violence. Hyejin decides to approach a representative of the Moen clan. He stands up, squares his shoulders, and approaches the scoundrel. Hyun, who was standing next to him, tries to calm Hyejin down, saying that it's not worth complicating the situation. Hang also notes that by such senseless acts, they can undermine the credibility of all clans. When Horim and Hyejin faced off, both looked quite strong and confident. But our hero stood up only to see if this scoundrel looked like a criminal from his past life, of which he was not sure. Hyejin decided to feel Horim's energy, and asked him questions to determine his intentions, as his energy was slightly different. Meanwhile, Horim began to emit the powerful chi energy of his Moen clan. Our hero was also not averse to competing with him and activated his secret technique. This technique filled the entire space, and was ready to destroy the villain at any moment, but Hyejin needed to check it carefully. Horim, feeling his energy, realized that Hyejin was reading his chi. Standing motionless, Horim wanted to try to influence Hyejin with his chakra, and then activated a defensive technique. Hyejin reacted sharply to this, as he considered such actions to be quite ugly. Jin Pan tried to stop his brother, but he knew better than to interfere, while the girl, stopping Jin, told him that it was better for him to stay away from his brothers. Her brother insisted that if he didn't intervene now, the consequences could be severe. She understood him, but she couldn't understand what was happening between Hyejin and Horim right now. She realized one thing: a person with a cold gaze like Horim's is unstoppable. Kunan's father approaches him and begins to wake him up to make sure he wakes up. Kunan has been unconscious all this time, and his relatives are trying to revive him, checking if he is okay. He grabbed his head, and faced with the question of what had happened, felt anger seize him again. Gradually realizing that no one physically touched him, he realizes that his pain has no limits. Feeling his status as a legitimate member of the Tang clan and the shame of defeat from an ordinary cup that hit him on the head, he is filled with anger again. His anger is growing and it seems impossible to stop him. He sees Hejin in front of him, who humiliated him, and activates the three Yangs. Activating his power, he approaches the two boys, but his main target is Hejin, whom he wants to kill. His brother tries to stop Kunan and shouts, warning Hyejin to be careful. Kunan, purring to himself, insidiously tries to attack Hyejin from the side. When he gets close enough, Kunan raises his hand with the intention of killing Hyejin, and the thought of killing him does not leave him. He is filled with rage and tries to stab our hero in the back with all his might. Gathering all his strength, the Dragon Clan representative attacks Hejin, who skillfully dodges the blow. Not only does he dodge, but he also manages to grab the attacker's arm and twist it so hard that it sounds like rust creaking. The pain that filled Kunan at that moment was indescribable. He screamed and could not calm down. Realizing that his arm could be torn off, he realizes that it is the same villain who is doing it. He tries to counterattack and collects chakra in his left hand, which is still intact. As soon as he strikes the side of Hejin's head, a bone in one of them cracks. More precisely, not just a bone, but Kunan's shoulder breaks and cracks almost instantly. His eyes expressed incredible surprise as he could have lost his shoulder in a second. Our hero Hejin, enveloped in the mystical energy of the 20 northern walls of paradise that filled the space, activates at the exact moment when Kunan was about to strike. Kunan fell to his knees in front of Hejin, sobbing, his tears and snot flying in all directions. Hejin holds his hand, looking at him like a moron, waiting for him to answer. Squinting his eyes, Hyejin sees that Kunan seemed uncontrollably frightened to the point of losing control. Hyejin feels uncomfortable watching this. Hyejin wants to kill Kunan, but something in his inner world stops him. From behind him, the Emperor of Darkness, as he was in his previous life, approaches him and addresses him. The Emperor directs the light of a time that was once powerful at Hejin, saying that now is not the time for revenge. He reminds Hejin that despite the situation, he must remember that this is not the time for retaliation. After comprehending the Emperor's words, Hyejin realizes that he must now focus on the right things. His goal remains to identify the criminal who destroyed his village and killed his entire family. Hejin lets go of the frightened daredevil's hand and looks into the eyes of Eren, who is watching closely. Eren sees the third young master of the Mian clan give in to his emotions uncontrollably in front of everyone. Our hero stands in a confident and strong pose, demonstrating inner peace. He remains calm, taming his anger and the power he could have used. Hejin extends his hand to Eren and asks if he wants to play with the third host. This phrase surprised everyone present, but Eren was not at all embarrassed. He found it funny that Hejin decided to address himself in such a form. As a descendant of the Green Horizon clan, he politely asked if he understood the offer. Pointing with his hand, he said that as the eldest among those present, he would like to express his gratitude. He points his finger at the guy who lost control, calling him a mad dog who spoils the atmosphere, and at this point several people lift him off his knees. Still, Arim emphasizes that it is time to put an end to this conflict. Arim points out that they are not alone, that there are many people here who could play with Hejin, but suggests that they do so later, and first he offers to have a drink together. But Hejin interrupts him, saying that he talks too much. Arim is indignant at the interruption, not understanding how Hejin dared to interrupt him. In response, our hero claims that if Arim does not make the first step, he will. Using the incredible power of the static singularity, Hejin moves as if walking on water, creating an impressive effect. He leaves behind not only a water trail, but also an indefinite mystery of his actions. The guy standing across the street doesn't understand what it is, because he's never seen anything like it. Seeing Hyejin slowly moving toward him, anxiety grows in him. All his nerves are on edge, and he feels dissonant, trying to figure out what can come of it. Hejin stands in front of Eren, looking him straight in the face, catching his gaze at a crucial moment. He moves not only slowly and deliberately, but also quickly, fixing Arena with a winner's gaze. Although the battle had not yet taken place, the clash was inevitable. Unable to withstand the tension, Eren is the first to strike at Hejin, who skillfully dodges his maneuvers. In just a second, he activates the steel chain blows that come down on Hejin, but Hejin deftly parries each blow, blocking it and fixing it. The audience watching this spectacle realizes that the sequence of steel chain attacks is also exhaustive. As predicted, everyone is wondering what martial art Hyejin of the Yen clan uses because he can block these blows so skillfully. At the climax, Hejin uses the 30 fists of the Yen clan, which is a basic but very effective clan martial art. And as soon as Arim's punch touches his arm, Hejin deftly parries it, pushing Eren back. The battle is taken over by our hero Hejin, who stubbornly holds his position. Despite this, he throws a cross kick that hits Arim hard in the elbow. Although Arim blocks the blow, The force throws him aside. Dust rose from the clash of two strong opponents. Feeling the effects of the blocked punch, Arim realizes that something is wrong with his arm. He looks at his arm and suspects that he might have broken it, thinking about his negligence. The guy looks at Hyejin, who explodes with the incredible energy of the Yen clan, and realizes that he is facing a real monster. Meanwhile, Hyejin notices that Arim is not ready to play all his cards. Caught up in the excitement of the battle, Hyejin asks Arim how long he's going to continue playing. Gathering his strength, Hyejin turns to Arim, emphasizing that things will not be so simple, materializing energy fragments in front of him that form a puzzle. In order to activate his true essence, he will have to compete, saying that he is going to kill him, and only then will he demonstrate all his skills. Arim looks at him and realizes that his self-confidence is off the charts, and he will pay like a fool, he says. Suddenly, a bunch of healthy guys are shouting, "Stop it!" Thus, the boys are surrounded by swordsmen, who begin to surround them from all sides. They deliberately surrounded them to make them the laughingstock of this festive gathering. Their behavior in this situation is inappropriate, and they need to stop without hesitation, because a bunch of soldiers will not allow them to do anything. And at that moment, a wave of rivalry rises over them. They look at each other like pieces of prey. We will find out how it all ends later. And now I thank you for watching this manga and ask you to subscribe to the channel so that we can make the headlines even more interesting and you can be happy. Thank you. When the boys were surrounded by armed warriors, they demanded silence during the sacred feast, where fighting between clans was forbidden. But the cursed misunderstanding did not allow the boys to calm down. One of the boys, the oldest, decided to intervene. He wanted to teach the rude boy some manners but realized that his actions were out of line. He stopped to warn the older man. This gesture gave the owner something to think about, although his indifferent gaze did not express any doubt about the correctness of his actions. The guy continued to address the hedgehog, calling him a criminal who started an unprecedentedly violent fight at this historic gathering, where no one had ever crossed such a line of impudence before. In his opinion, the hedgehog acted extremely boldly, attacking someone who could have fought back fiercely. The angry young man could not calm down as he saw the highborn ignore his claims, despite the fact that his clan, the Gal, was in control of the situation, preventing a real fight from breaking out. He wondered how much longer they would underestimate his clan. Suddenly, a woman's voice interrupted his loud shouts, urging him to stop so as not to blame everyone around him. When he looked around to see who had so boldly confronted him, there was a charming girl standing in front of him, who came very close to prevent the worst from happening. Behind her was a hedgehog, for whom she stood up loyally. Ahen looked him stubbornly in the eye, indignant that he had called her a baby, because they were at an official meeting where it was important to watch your words. At this point, Hen suddenly fainted with shame, because his attempts to resolve the situation only made things worse. The girl decided to clarify the situation from her side, explaining what was really going on. She pointed to Mr. Tanyan's son, who unexpectedly interrupted the tranquility of the event, adding to the nervousness of all those present. Although Tanyan's son lay by, exhausted from hearing the accusations, a representative of the Nam Gal clan asked the girl why she was aiming to blame young Mr. Yen when it was clear that he had not fueled the conflict. Instead of stopping Mr. Tang from attacking Min, she argued that it was all nonsense. The girl expressed her dissatisfaction with the fact that they did not pay attention to Mr. Hedjin's explanations. Hedjin, raising his hands, seemed to realize his mistake and was ready to admit it. Our hero should have stopped and asked for Min's forgiveness, because in the girl's opinion, she stood on the side of truth, and she was not ashamed to show it to everyone present. Miyen shrugged his shoulders and couldn't understand the girl's logic, which seemed too complicated to him, being in the center of this senseless conflict. The girl explained to everyone that, as far as she knew, the Green Mountain clan to which Yen belonged did not use any secret weapon-throwing techniques. He had only tried to ask Mr. Tang, but had missed. She turned to Hyejin, a member of the Yen clan, not dismissing the idea that he was partly responsible for the war. She asked him to explain what had happened between them, turning her piercing gaze on him. Jean met her gaze with a fierce expression, as he had no intention of explaining anything to anyone. His motives were personal. The girl hoped that her words would help diffuse the tense atmosphere and smooth out the conflict. However, this did not happen. Although Jean's move was evil, his anger was relieved only by his brother, who pinched his arm. Jean looked back to see who had done it and saw the face of his dear brother, whom he loved dearly. He realized from his brother's look that he had to stop, because the situation was going too far. He sighed with a heavy heart, letting go of the past resentment and anger that had arisen between them not so long ago. Our hero turned away to think about his actions and how he had rushed to make decisions. Watching the crowd around him, he realized that after finding a reason to act, he was unable to control himself. and his intentions seemed too aggressive. He had no choice but to accept this and apologize to the mean clan, recognizing that the rumors of their power were not unfounded. He admitted that he wanted to learn something from this guy, and that's what pushed him into the conflict. He decided to apologize from the bottom of his heart and asked for forgiveness. Min looked at him as an uncontrollable warrior, but at the same time he realized that he had won and approached it with understanding. All the while, Hyejin was trying to ease the tension by saying that the atmosphere had deteriorated and reminding everyone of his father's words, who always told him to think before he acted, but he forgot about it again. The boy scratched the back of his head, realizing that he would face severe punishment and a 3-day hunger strike if his father found out about today's events. Everyone around him took his words as a joke. Ahin laughed at his joke and flirted with him sweetly, which attracted his attention. This didn't sit well with one guy from the Namgal clan, who was looking at a girl he liked. But she was showing attention to another, in his opinion, a scoundrel. Hyejin continued to make amends and offered everyone a drink at his own expense at tomorrow's banquet to apologize for the trouble he had caused today. He would have been happy if the crowd of representatives had forgiven him for his rudeness. When suddenly a big man came out of the crowd and said that it was rash. He walked right up to Hyejin, put his hands on his sides, and addressed him, looking him straight in the eye. "What do you want, Mr. Daho?" Mr. Daho replied that 1 cup of liquor would not be enough for a judge of his size, and he invited everyone at tomorrow's banquet to drink until they drop, saying that if the host could stand it to the end, he would consider forgiving him. Hyejin, with a smile on his face, accepted the offer, because he had no other choice. Everyone was eagerly preparing for the banquet, appreciating the courageous act of the Yen clan master, while the Nimgal clan representative was left alone, motionless with surprise and confusion. He could hear people talking about this rogue and the situation that had turned him into a laughingstock. For Gennady, it is unclear how it happened that the whole situation got out of control, and he found himself in the role of the extreme. Watching Hyejin and Min, he considered them his main opponents, but he still had time to act. In the courtyard of the Poison Dragon clan, a big healthy guy asked him who he was. Right there in the courtyard, the 2 clan leaders began to get acquainted while the culprit of all the events was lying knocked out and helpless on the ground. The next day at the restaurant, at a local gathering, people gathered around the tables to eat and spend time together. Hyejin was also present at this meeting and was having a good time, just like the others, until a man approached him. The man introduced himself as Chusen, a security captain, and he looked quite stern. Chusong addressed Hyejin, insisting on frankness and saying that he should leave the city immediately before the banquet began. John Pan, hearing how the guard had treated his brother rudely, angrily threw his spoon on the table. "You're being too rough with my brother," he told the guard. "If you're so brave, do it again." However, Chuson did not back down, and without leaving the brother's side, again emphasized that they should leave the place before the celebrations began at noon. A representative of the Nimgal clan, who had been watching this scene closely, could not hide his satisfaction that they would leave the feast and drank a glass of liquor to celebrate. The guard did not leave them alone, deciding to launch a powerful psychological attack. Hyejin put down the chopsticks he was eating, feeling the growing pressure from the guards. He asked the guard again if he really wanted him to leave, trying to keep calm. The guard confidently replied that this was exactly what he wanted, but Hyejin insisted on knowing why. The security representative explained that, due to numerous past events, Hyejin had too much of a past that was dragging him down. Since he was in charge of order, the guard believed that Hyejin had no right to attend the meeting. But John Penn could not contain his rage, as they had already decided this issue yesterday, and he could not allow this scoundrel to dictate to them what to do. Hyejin said he plans to apologize during today's banquet in an effort to resolve the conflict peacefully. However, the guard pointed his finger at Hyejin, saying that his behavior was already suspicious, and that an apology from him would not be sufficient because of his unworthy behavior yesterday. He then coolly walked out and continued eating. Hyejin, trying to remain calm, demonstrated that the guard might be doubting his actions yesterday and not fully aware of the consequences of his behavior. After saying that, the guard decided to leave, but not without a warning. If they didn't leave the party, he would throw them out by force. John Pan, amazed by such impudence, decided to stop this scoundrel, arguing that he had no right to expel his brother. "You are just one of the guards of one clan," he said, drawing attention to the abuse of power. "You have no right to restrict the rights of representatives of other clans at this banquet," John Pan continued, speaking for justice. The guard just smiled ridiculously and replied that John Pan was inexperienced and did not understand the situation. This whole meeting was called by the Namgal clan, and all the guests were personally invited by our clan. "That means," he explained. That we have the right to refuse any undesirable element that might interfere with the meeting, the security guard added, emphasizing his right to maintain order. Our owner wanted to settle this yesterday out of his kindness, but I am not as easy as I seem. I will not ignore the source of the problem. The guard expressed his determination. Hench, who was sitting next to him, overheard the guard planning to expel those he didn't like, and felt happy at the thought that they would soon be driven out of the feast. Heijin turned to his brother, wondering what the next steps were, how they could protect their rights and save face in this difficult situation. Heijin took the rice sticks that were constantly reaching for the plate of food. He took a piece of the delicious dinner and gently put it in his brother's mouth, trying to calm him down. Eat until everything is cold. You shouldn't miss a meal because of a barking dog, Heijin said, trying to support his brother morally. When the guard heard him called a dirty, stinking dog, his face distorted in rage. Heijin continued to joke about the guard, but his words made the atmosphere even hotter. The guard approached their table again and loudly kicked the floor, attracting the attention of the entire room. "Repeat what you said!" the guard demanded, but Heijin only said that the noise made him feel ashamed. Maybe this dog is so eager to go outside and bark because he is very hungry. He needs his owner to tame him and take him aside, joked Heijin, emphasizing the offensive words. The defender of the ceremony had never heard such disrespect for himself in his entire history. Unable to contain his rage, he pulled his sword from its sheath, preparing to attack. "You will leave here, Heijin, even if I have to use force," he threatened. Behind them, Hen stepped in, grabbed the guard's arm in time to stop his sword, and discreetly emphasized that it was not appropriate for the leader of the squad to make so much noise. "You shouldn't get angry no matter what. We're all here for the celebration," he said calmly, holding the guard's sword in his hand. When Heijin saw Han, he exclaimed with pleasure, "Here comes the owner of the hungry, stinky dog," and looked at the guard with a smile. A man was sitting at a table nearby, listening to everything that was happening and greedily eating his food, devouring it in large chunks. He chewed so loudly that crumbs flew out of his mouth and he looked somewhat unkempt and homeless. This man watched the ruckus and realized that the meeting was turning into a lot of trouble. He didn't like it because he wanted to draw attention to himself during the ceremony. But because of these people, no one paid attention to him. With narrowed eyes, he focused on the young master, who was interesting to him. He had heard about his victory over Ma Bong and was interested to see how this guy would handle the situation now. Hyun, coming to the table, told Heijin that he had just humiliated the captain of the Namgal clan's security. Our hero, in turn, did not think that the guard was the main problem, but he felt no less humiliated by their verbal skirmishes. Heijin believed that Hyun was using his subordinate as a dog because he was afraid of confronting him directly. Hyun was furious at these accusations because he was not afraid of Heijin at all. Heijin, feeling that Hyun was hiding his anger because of the story with his older sister, decided that as a true warrior, Hyun should challenge him to a duel instead of using his subordinates. This statement deeply shocked Gennady, as his own eyes openly reflected the cruelty and surprise of such words. Hearing this, the people around them realized that the accusations were fair, and tension spread in the room. Hearing this, Hyun felt resentment toward his sister Namgal Seonghwa, who was now at the banquet, take over his mind, making him even more aggressive. Angrily, he shouted at Heijin to stop spreading speculation, because he would never have given such an order, and the fact that Heijin was discussing it in front of everyone was a humiliation to his clan. Heijin replied with a smile. "So you say you didn't give the order? Then I hope you won't get in the way when I teach your bodyguard who disrespected another clan a lesson." At that moment, Hyun realized that Heijin had taken him at his word and outsmarted him at his own game. Sitting at the table with a smile, Heijin offered an alternative. "Perhaps I will teach your bodyguard a lesson myself, for I am also a young master and I have the right to defend my clan." This misunderstanding had gone too far, and Hen realized how difficult it would be for him to get out of this situation with honor. The security commander intervened in the dialogue, stating that he was ready to take full responsibility for the actions of his subordinates. "I'll decide this issue myself," he said, about to expel Heijin if he did not stop provoking him. Heijin, in turn, offered to organize a duel to resolve the conflict once and for all on an equal footing. "I'll teach this guard a painful lesson, and it won't affect our inter-clan training. The fight can create a pleasant atmosphere and even help us become friends," Heijin said. The commander of the guard, albeit reluctantly, agreed to the duel, as he had no choice and it was impossible to retract his words. The guests at the table realized that this match might not end well. He also planned to use this opportunity to impress his former opponent Mian. The girls, who were sitting separately, watched the events, realizing that Chukon, although he looked like an ordinary warrior, had something more in him. This situation created a tense atmosphere, but it also gave Haejin and Hyun the opportunity to reach a new level of relationship and test their strength in a fair fight. He was one of the most powerful warriors, rumored to have conquered a third of all the bandits in Fae, the city where they were located. The girl approached Han and urged Jongpyo to stop them before it was too late. John Penn, feeling desperate, knew that it was almost impossible to stop them, especially with such high stakes at stake. Now that it has come to a fight, we cannot retreat without defending our brother's honor, because if he loses, the honor of our house will go down with the ruins, he said. Ahin suddenly got up from her table, saying that she had to stop Haejin and that they should hurry. Her brother, however, interrupted her, suggesting that she rush to the field to watch the match instead of stopping it. He had already prepared an outfit for her, anticipating the possibility of a duel. She suddenly dressed in it and remarked, "We will all meet there," referring to the battlefield. John Pan, putting his hand on the boy's shoulder, admitted that it was hard for him to have such a sister, to which the boy replied that it was no easier with his brother. A few minutes later, they all gathered on the training field, where everyone was amazed at what was happening, feeling really excited about the growing intrigue. The security commander confidently thought he could easily defeat Haejin, perceiving his insolence as youthful maximalism. Haejin, full of determination, pulled out his huge staff and began to wave it, demonstrating his readiness for battle. He got into a fighting stance and called the commander of the guard to start the fight without wasting a second. But the commander of the guard, instead of attacking immediately, stretched out his hand and showed 3 fingers, symbolizing to Haejin that he was giving him the opportunity to make 3 strikes. Haejin didn't understand the sign at first, but assumed that it was a proposal for 3 attack attempts. The commander of the guard confirmed this, explaining that as the acting leader of the swordsman's department of the great Namgal clan, he naturally gives his opponent 3 strikes as a sign of respect for his rank and skill. For Haejin, this proposal sounded quite absurd, because in his past life he had defeated much more serious opponents, and now this possibility only made him smile ironically. Haejin and his opponent got into a fighting stance. The first blow fell on Haejin, so he had to think fast and decide on his tactics. Furrowing his brow, our hero surveyed the environment, comparing the circumstances with his plan of action, which he had already developed in his head. Haejin started the attack with a menacing look, but his intuition told him not to rush things. Deciding to change his tactics, he went on the defensive, easily lowering his sharp long sword to his shoulder in preparation for a possible counterattack. This maneuver surprised the enemy captain as he realized Haejin was not going to attack first. "I've changed my mind," Haejin said laconically, escalating the intrigue of the duel. In the next moment, Haejin swung, and his long dagger began to split, emitting streams of dark energy. "Are you willing to pay for your words?" asked Haejin sharply. The commander relented, and made it clear that if he lowered his sword before Haejin's 3rd strike, his head would fly off his shoulders, painting everything around him red. After Haejin's speech and his impressive maneuvers, the audience held its breath, overwhelmed by the shock of the sudden turn of events. However, the representatives of the higher clans were most impressed by Haejin's stance, which reflected not only physical fitness, but also a deep understanding of martial arts. Some of the audience held their breath, seeing such skill and uniqueness of the coinage technique for the first time. Hing, realizing that his defender and fellow fighter was in great danger, shouted out, trying to get his attention with a loud cry. But the leader of the Chusong clan, surprised by Haejin's technique, could not look away, standing with his mouth open in amazement. Suddenly, everything in his eyes turned red, and a huge axe appeared in front of him, as if materialized out of thin air. Haejin pushed off the ground sharply, causing it to collapse beneath him, which was the beginning of his first strike. He was not going to spare his opponent, and a powerful strike like lightning fell on the enemy, illuminating the battlefield with bright light. In an attempt to repel the attack, the commander put up a block, hoping to stop the next attack. As soon as Haejin's spear hit the captain's block, he gritted his teeth in pain and struggled to keep the blow. It was not easy to hold such a powerful punch, and a second question appeared on the lips of the audience. Where did such a young fighter get such incredible strength? However, Haejin did not intend to stop fighting. He was preparing to strike again. This blow was filled with even more rage and indignation at the captain for his audacity. The captain deftly dodged the blow because the force of this blow had the potential to split even a stone. The speed of the attack was unprecedented, far outpacing any previous attacks the commander had ever seen. Although the captain avoided a direct hit, the force of the explosion still damaged his clothes. This seriously angered the captain, because he thought such force on the part of the young fighter was excessive. The 3rd strike was the most unexpected. Dozens of sharp tips filled with dark energy fell on the captain. Horrified by the fatal blow, the commander realized that he might die. However, gathering his will into a fist, he drew his sword and began to parry the attacks, fighting for his life. Meanwhile, our hero watched the result of his blows, waiting for the opportunity to end the fight. After repelling 3 powerful blows from Heejin, the commander felt very tired and regretted allowing the battle to gain such momentum. At this critical moment, it was extremely dangerous for the commander, because he almost lost his vigilance. Although he blocked the blows, a picture flashed through his mind of his body being pierced by holes from sharp attacks. Heejin's words that the commander had already lost brought him sobriety. Holding his spear on his shoulder, Heejin had already warned him, emphasizing the inevitability of his defeat. If the commander fails to withstand the 3rd blow, Heejin promises to kill him. Heejin intended to make the commander pay for his inappropriate words. The battle continues, and Heejin attacks with renewed vigor, sharply raising his spear. At this time, the audience was watching the events of this exciting match with intensity. The 2 strong men with serious faces watched attentively, realizing that the battle was much more difficult than they had initially thought. Looking back at each other, they already understood who would win this battle. Heejin, like a madman, struck harder and harder. The department commander was already exhausted by these merciless attacks, which were gradually destroying his reputation. The guy, like a swallow, quickly flew up and swung his weapon. He struck a blow which the commander met with his sword, but the force of the blow caused the sword to fly out and hit the commander directly in the face, causing bleeding from the mouth. The general, stunned by the blow, grabbed his head, and it seemed that he would instantly lose consciousness. As soon as he let his guard down, a dark spear flew straight at his head. The commander made every effort to repel this unexpected attack. However, all the bold commander could do was block the blows, and Heejin took off again, determined to erase the last doubt in the captain's mind. The commander instantly activates the lazy donkey twist technique, elegantly avoiding the fatal blow as if he were dancing with death itself. He almost laughs in the face of danger, feeling the adrenaline kick in from the joy of saving a life. His gaze suddenly becomes serious, realizing that every next move can decide the fate of the match. There is no feeling of relief anywhere. Instead, every muscle is tense, ready for the inevitable confrontation. The commander looks at his body convincingly, reminding himself of his invincibility and greatness. His sword flashes with new power. Chi energy fills his blade, ready to release his anger. He gets into a fighting stance, declaring his intention to resume the fight and prove his superiority. His pride and duty motivate him to fight to the end, setting an example of courage for all his subordinates. "Now we'll see who the real warrior is," the commander declares with a loud roar, ready to meet any challenge. Suddenly, as he prepares for his next attack, an unexpected blow hits him in the chest, knocking him back at the speed of thought. The pain of the blow was so severe that the commander could not restrain himself and burst into an angry shout, calling his opponent the worst names. Filled with hatred and rage, he raises his sword high above his head, ready to demonstrate his true power in a decisive attack. At this critical moment, the guy suddenly throws a stone at the commander. The stone hits the commander with great force, effectively interrupting his attack and forcing him to stop. Then the guy activates the 3 swords chasing life technique, a brutal method that leaves no chance for those who stand in his way. Heejin found himself surrounded by 3 powerful blows from different directions, each of which he had to meet with strength and skill because his survival depended on it. Although the guy deflected every blow with dexterity, one of the attacks flew so close to him that it almost hit him. His brother John Pan thought for a moment that Heejin had been struck by a serious blow, because everything indicated that this could happen. Heejin deftly avoided the fatal blow, feeling death whispering in his ear. He knows that any moment now, and the fight could be over. As always, the guy kept his composure, calmly accepting each new challenge. He concentrated all his energy by activating the static singularity technique, which allowed him to stop time. This technique focused on his leg, giving him unusual abilities and advantages in maneuvering. His opponent, the commander, is bewildered by this magic, because he has never seen anything like it before in his long life. The commander tried to strike with his sword, hoping to catch Heejin. However, the invisible armor that protected Heejin's did not allow the powerful blow to reach its target. The response was instantaneous. The blow he delivered immediately hit the commander's right side. Heejin not only used the technique of a great warrior, but also masterfully managed all its nuances. He had the 12 heavenly walls in the north technique, which protected him like an impenetrable shield. The blow to the commander seriously damaged his arm, causing a piercing response of pain. When the commander pulled back, he realized that the boy was a real villain, hiding his true power under the mask of a young man. It is not only his youth that is behind him, but also his enormous inner strength that turns him from an ordinary opponent into a dangerous killer. This strength makes him a deadly warrior capable of many things, regardless of his age. The commander howled in pain, feeling humiliated and angry at the boy. Although his arm was almost unresponsive, he had no intention of giving up. He mustered all his strength to fight to the last and kill this scoundrel who had stood in his way. Haejin held his spear, ready to fight back, trying to end the fight with his victory. It was no longer just a sword, but a massive cold weapon filled with chi energy that sparkled in his hands. The commander jumped from the ground, activating the equipment that cut through the air with his powerful energy. Our hero rushed forward, his weapon bifurcated, creating the illusion of 1,000 spears rushing toward the commander. Two powerful warriors, each with unique techniques, are ready to face off in a final confrontation from which only one will be able to escape alive. But suddenly the commander saw that these were not ordinary swords in Haejin's hands. They were the true art of a wild beast, with huge, sharp teeth that brutally cut his body from all sides. Each tooth desperately cut into the skin, causing the commander to feel sharp pain. In this fight, Haejin clearly won, flying over the commander, who was falling helplessly to the ground like a corpse. His sword slipped from his hands and his body lost coordination. At the same time, Haejin remained steadfast, as if nothing had happened. The commander, disfigured by the battle, fell to the ground. But something inside him prevented him from dying immediately. In front of the crowd, he falls to his knees, spitting blood. Everyone realized that the great lord of the On clan had been defeated. The guy decided to end the fight with the death of the captain. He rushed at the enemy with his spear, and everyone realized that it was a mistake, shouting at him to stop. At the same second, Haejin was running at incredible speed with his spear like the wind, while the commander was on his knees, no longer hoping to see the light. And as soon as he saw the blade in front of his head with one eye, the commander realized that death was coming. But suddenly someone intervened, stopping Haejin's fatal blow. He was an inconspicuous, poorly dressed man who looked like a hobo, who held back Haejin's powerful punch, saving the commander from a decisive blow. The guy recognized him and was surprised by his presence. As it turned out, this man was not a simple homeless man. He was the leader of the Union of Dragons, a great man in every sense. This man was amazed that Haejin recognized him, even though he was holding his spear with both hands at the time. The veins in his arms were tense, and it was clear that it was hard for him. He told our hero that he was still just a receiver, and his owner was still feeling fine. Holding Haejin's punch, he praised him for his strength, but advised him to stop and talk. The guy relieved the tension and took his spear aside, indicating his readiness for a dialogue. At that moment, Haejin was rushing with his spear towards the commander, who was already on his knees. Realizing that he would not be able to fight anymore, Haejin asked the leader of the poor man's sect why he stopped the blow. If he had done something wrong, his arm would have flown off, to which the leader replied that it would only help him in his future begging. Stopping the boy, the poor man was surprised that Haejin knew him, but he had never been to the territory of the On clan, and had never met him or his father. Haejin explained that he had heard various rumors that he was the future head of a sect of poor people. The poor man just scratched the back of his head, because he thought it was strange that there were rumors about such an inconspicuous guy. Haejin's memory recalled how he often drank vodka with Ga-duk-sang in his previous life, and he hadn't changed at all. But Haejin only met Ga-duk-san when he became the Dark Emperor in his previous life, which was much later than the current time. Although Ga-duk-san joked that the loss of one arm was a small price to pay for saving someone's life, the point was that he should not have been in this place in the past, and so our hero realized that the present is changing because of his actions. Meanwhile, he couldn't even imagine what if he hadn't arrived at the tennis tune pavilion. Brother and sister would have already died at the hands of Ma Bang, and the reality would have been completely different. The poor man interrupted him, pointed his finger in the direction Haejin was supposed to go, and said that they were waiting for him there. Haejin turned in the direction indicated. He saw a huge crowd of spectators who were shocked by the boy's cruelty. After all, he almost killed the commander, which was completely inhuman. People were horrified to realize that Haejin was a thief who had organized more than just a training match. Meanwhile, the commander was lying in a completely broken condition, with no hope of getting up after the battle. Our hero realized that his actions had confused everyone present. And, although he had originally planned to kill the captain, this did not give people any understanding of his motives. This was unacceptable for the ceremony, and many were shocked by his words. Someone from the crowd raised his hand, and all the attention was focused on this person. It was a big guy from the Dragon Clan who asked Haejin a question. "Don't you think you've gone too far?" He added, "Everyone here thought it was just a conflict of opinion, and you fought it to the death. Was it really necessary?" We moved to a room where the clan representative who gathered everyone was far away from the battlefield, where his warrior commander was defeated. He watched the events from a considerable distance, feeling the tension building. Hen, full of anger, ruthlessly smashed the walls around him. Fragments of broken bricks fell to the floor, indicating his anger. He did not know how to calm himself down after such a defeat of his soldier. He was also hurt by the realization that this guy had humiliated him in front of a girl he liked, whose name was Ahea. His despair knew no bounds, and as he watched himself, he felt himself overwhelmed with rage. He was so angry that he couldn't stop himself and kept spewing his anger at the innocent brick wall. The moment Hen and his servant arrived on the battlefield, he saw a horrific scene. He turned to his servant with a request. At this critical moment, Hen ordered his servant to immediately find out which hospital his soldier was in and report back to him. The servant struck his chest to symbolize his agreement and hurried to fulfill the order. The boy clenched his teeth when he thought about the scoundrel Hedjin and swore that he would kill him. It's a beautiful sunny day, and Hedjin turns to the big man Pendeho. He was impressed by his request, as he was terrified of being insured after the incident with the captain. Hedjin threw the stick into his brother's hands, who did not understand why he was entrusted with this staff. He asked the big guy if he could train his brother. The big guy didn't want to agree at first, but Hedjin persuaded him, as he considered him a strong rival for his talented brother, who hadn't met any worthy opponents yet. Since the match of honor was already over, it was time to strengthen friendships, which was the purpose of this meeting. Hedjin looked with a smile at his brother, who was amazed at the unpredictable actions of this guy. By taking the stick, he dispelled all negative thoughts, and John Pena was not going to waste time. He asked his brother Peng to mentor him, and the big man gladly accepted the offer. Everyone took up the idea and began to popularize this idea. Someone in the crowd even expressed a desire to compete with the Zhuge clan master. The hostess, in turn, looking at the big man, also expressed a desire to check his changes in martial arts. A young man approached the poor man and asked him to learn from the master. This made the master laugh because the conflict was over and the atmosphere was diffused. The master supported the boy who approached him, promising to have a good time. Hedjin approached the guy and told him that their previous duel was quickly interrupted and that if he offered to fight now, there should be no problem. This was the second attempt, and the young master tried to involve another fool in the battle. Everyone started to train on the playground, learning from each other and gaining skills, but the brutal sound of battle was heard again. Everyone is holding their breath, isn't it again? Yes, it's Hedjin again fighting another representative of a strong nobility, an influential clan. People wondered where the guy got his strength from, because he had recently fought a commander. But Hedjin didn't care. He attacked the guy with a stick. The boy blocks his blow, but he hears the crack of the stick. Looking at it, he sees that Hedjin's blow has even begun to cut through the stick. Deflecting the blow aside, and after demonstrating a few tricks, the guy threw Hedjin away to a distance that gave him a chance to think. How did it happen that his opponent was hitting so hard? But our hero was not going to give up or stand still. The guy was even afraid of his opponent's quick attack, and because of that he couldn't even block his shot. But at the last moment he managed to repel the attack. Activating his chi energy, he repelled one attack after another, attacking Hedjin and not letting him rest, putting ki energy into each blow. Hedjin was just testing this scoundrel to see who was who. During one attack, the guy's body caught fire with an aura. At that moment, our hero realized that this was very familiar to him. It was the moment when his opponent was filled with chakra and was preparing to attack. Hedjin did not stand idly by and materialize the axe of the god of darkness. Two great forces clashed in a fight on the training ground. After the opponent hit him, the stick fell in half, breaking into pieces. The guy, out of breath, defending himself against Hedjin, but with a broken stick, offered to end the courageous battle there. This was really important because a lot of things could have influenced it. Our hero agreed to this offer, but something in his behavior changed. He moved away from his opponent and did not say a word to him. Suddenly his face expressed a change in mood. As he walked, he realized that the chi energy was the same, and his techniques were identical to those that had once caused great grief in the past. When he compared the pros and cons, he already knew that the people who attacked his village, they killed his brother and took the lives of his people, ending the existence of their cult. No doubt they were from the Mean clan. And standing with his back to this scoundrel, our hero realized that the hands of the Mean clan were stained with blood, and it was they, the scoundrels, who destroyed his dynasty. In a moment, day turned to night. The moon hung high, illuminating the city where our hero was staying. He silently watched the silvery light falling on the houses. Hedjin concentrated on accumulating chi energy, rhythmically inhaling and exhaling. He felt every molecule of his body like never before. Sitting in a meditative pose in the middle of nature, Hedjin glowed like a firefly, continuously increasing his power in the midst of peace and quiet. Thanks to this technique, he almost completely cleansed himself of the dark, murky chi energy, feeling a surge of pure power. Deciding to rest for a while, Hedjin stopped his intense concentration. He lay down on the ground, closed his eyes, letting nature envelop him. As he rested, Hedjin felt a growing fatigue from all he had experienced during this meditation. Eventually, he learned that the Mean clan was responsible for his suffering in his past life. a discovery that stunned him. While fighting with a member of the Mian clan, Hejin noticed that their method of controlling internal chi energy was exactly the same as the martial art he had seen in his past life during an attack on his clan. It turned out that chi energy differs for each clan depending on the breathing technique, so clan leaders strictly control the transmission of methods for managing internal energy. The same blade technique that Hyejin had seen in his past life looked a little different now, just because of the change in weaponry, so he didn't recognize it at first. The weaponry had changed, but the essence of the technique remained the same as on that fateful day. And that was what confused Hejin when he finally realized it. Lying on the ground, Hyejin went deeper into his memories, reviewing moments of the past. He couldn't understand how this could happen, replaying in his mind the moment when he was tearing up the leaves on the bushes, trying to escape reality. His memories took him back to the moment when his brother was on his knees, and the big guy raised his hand, ready to deliver the blow that changed Hejin's life forever. Even at that critical moment when his brother's life was coming to an end, and when the enemy's attacks became stronger, and Hejin's life was on the brink, his brother kept begging Hejin to run away to save his life. And even when he was being killed, he did not betray his brother, did not give away his whereabouts. He didn't look back at Hejin, because he knew that if he was discovered, he would also face death. Hyejin, hiding in the bamboo bushes, was so horrified by what he saw that he could not force his body to move. Fear paralyzed him, but his instinct for self-preservation took over, and he ran as fast as he could, tears of pain mixed with blood dripping on the ground as he ran, filling the night with his suffering. In the end, he was able to escape from certain death, but his family and friends did not. The grief and pain hit him right in the heart, causing Hejin to cry continuously for 3 days and 3 nights. The pain did not subside, and the hatred for the enemies only grew. At that moment, Hejin made a promise to himself, a vow that changed his entire life. He would never regret anything again. Lying on the ground, he remembered the pain, the all-too-familiar moment when his heart was filled with unwavering determination. Suddenly, someone came up behind me and said, "Ew, that's bitter." Shocked by the sudden interruption, Hejin got up, ready to find out who dared to disturb his peace in the dead of night. A representative of the poor man's clan suddenly appeared, claiming that all the plants around him had wilted because of his murderous energy and mood. Hyejin was not at all prepared for the meeting and wiped away his tears, trying to find the words to answer. He asked the poor man what brought him here, noticing that the man was holding something behind his back. "Nothing special, just this bag," the man replied. He showed the bag to Hejin and dumped the contents on the ground, explaining that he had come because Hejin had not shown up at the party that evening. The poor man brought alcohol and snacks with him, hoping that they would drink together. The idea seemed very attractive to Hejin, and he smiled at the unexpected hospitality. They sat on the rocks near the tree, and the first glass of delicious alcohol was poured, waiting for them to take it. Clinking glasses, they decided to have a drink. They poured strong alcohol and snacked on the meat the poor man had brought with him, enjoying a relaxing evening after so much trouble. After drinking a glass, the poor man reassured Hejin, saying that he shouldn't worry about his brother, because he has great relationships with others. "Your brother is a wonderful person," he continued. "If you could see him, you would understand his innocence and charisma, which attracts others. Unlike you, who is always so frowning," the poor man added. Hejin did not object, recognizing that they were indeed very different. The poor man did not stop and advised Hejin to smile more often, because he was pleased to see him happy. Hejin replied that he would not smile without a reason. The poor man replied, "If you are as strong as a stone, what is stopping you from smiling? Smile more often, so that things will appear that are worth smiling about." Changing the subject, Hejin said that he would not be able to hold a bottle of alcohol for long, and that he needed to replace the glass immediately. Pouring alcohol into a glass, Hejin asked if he could ask the poor man for something special. The poor man was surprised that a strong guy like Hyejin wanted to ask for something, assuming that it was more of a task than a simple request. But the poor man was ready for this task, because his sect values information, and he promised to do whatever was required of him. Waiting for the details of the task from Hejin, Hejin got up from the table because he had to speak quietly, and approached the poor man, whispering in his ear. Hejin's words shocked the poor man, causing his pupils to dilate. A cold wind swept through the night forest, filling the atmosphere with tension. The poor man, dumbfounded, did not know what to say to Hejin's serious words. After a few sips of alcohol, the poor man admitted that the first 2 requests were easy for him, but the third one to dig for the clan was something else entirely. Hejin replied that if it was too hard, the poor man could refuse. The poor man hit the stone, got up, and said he could handle it, but he needed a reason why it was worth doing. The guy gestured with the number 3 and said that if the poor man fulfilled 3 requests for him and did his job well, Hejin would tell him all the reasons. The poor man stood up shocked. He wondered why he had to get involved in such a business. In a darkened room, two friends are discussing a plan. One of them, a member of the Tang clan, suggests attacking a powerful villain who has personally insulted him. His friend does not want to get his hands dirty, but for a member of the Tang clan, it is a matter of honor. A representative of the Tang clan agrees to act together, but emphasizes the need for careful preparation. He promised to contact his ally as soon as he left the meeting at the place called the Heirs with the Broken Arm. Khan stands by the door so that no one can hear their conversation. One of them asks why he hates his victim so much. Han, in turn, justifies his hatred, but the representative of the Tang clan laughs ironically, considering his reasons not serious enough even to offend a dog. Han is irritated by the comments of a member of the Tang clan, who says that before using such persuasion, Han should curb his thirst for killing. In the end, it is clear that Khan does not just hate his victim, he wants him dead. Khan denies it, but tells his friend to take the opportunity while he can still keep his pride. If he doesn't take this opportunity, he will regret it later. Despite everything, Khan decided to commit the attack, even though his friend did not ask for it. Left with only one hand, he smiles through the hatred that burns in his heart, and promises Khan that he will not return to this city unless he dips his hands in the blood of the enemy. Thus begins the 20th chapter of this story, and we move to a place devoid of grass covered with mud, where autumn leaves are flying around. Hyejin passes by a street where autumn leaves fall directly into his hair, painting a picture of a meeting with autumn. After a long time in this place, he feels it's time to go back to the end. The guy realizes that he has a lot to do and needs to get home as soon as possible. Since he has learned about thieves who may threaten his clan, Hyejin needs to improve his martial arts skills and reorganize the clan's forces. He does not recall pleasant moments with the poor man and hopes that he will be able to get the information he needs. During their conversation at a picnic in the moonlight, the poor man was preparing to leave and advised, "It is better to strike while the iron is hot." The poor man gathered up everything he had brought with him and told Hyejin that in order to fulfill his request, he needed to contact the poor people to investigate that evening, but that this might not be enough. In response, Hyejin asked if he needed to pay a contact person from the poor man's sect in his clan. The poor man, hearing this, raised his hand up and waved it, indicating that there was no need to pay. He said he didn't need money, and instead it was better to prepare more delicious food for him as a form of payment. Hyejin was absolutely sure that he would succeed. His faith in himself was unshakable. While standing with his brother, they were approached by hefty men who asked if they were going to leave so quickly and greeted them. Hyejin replied that if fate brought them together again, they would meet. He felt sad that they hadn't even had a drink together yet. The big man's second brother tapped Yan Peng on the back as a sign of support and laughed, knowing that Yan Peng had worked hard yesterday to help deliver liquor instead of his brother and was now suffering from a hangover. It was a pleasant experience for each of them, because they were happy to make new acquaintances and to have such connections with other fraternities. As soon as Hyejin was about to walk to his wagon, someone else decided to come to say goodbye to him. It was Hyun's girlfriend, who was outraged that they hadn't even had lunch together before they left. Hyejin refused, explaining that they were in a hurry. Hyejin approached the girl's brother and said that if he came, he would show him the city. When the girl heard this, she asked, "What about me?" Hyejin looked at her seriously and said, "Well, you can do it too." But she was angry that it had taken him so long to tell her. Ahin pulled a pouch out of his pocket and held it out to Hyejin, palm forward. Hyejin was surprised by the unexpected gift and did not understand what it was, to which the girl explained that it was a brightly colored plate from the Juge clan. Since they have recently started producing weapons, the company is located near the famous mountain, which is accompanied by a map. Hyejin should visit this place when he has time. Hyejin wondered why the girl decided to give him this information. That's because, according to the girl, a spear and a staff are not the best fighting companions for a guy. And although she doesn't know what his main weapon is, if he goes there when he has free time, he can choose a really good and high-quality weapon. Hyejin held the sign in his hands and was very interested in the offer. He sincerely thanked the girl for such a gift, despite their different backgrounds. The girl in turn noted that it was nothing for her. She also explained that it was her way of thanking him for saving the first daughter from the Zhuge clan, who can now live her luxurious life, and even her father would consider it a good deal for their clan. After that meeting, they became friends and exchanged pleasantries. Hyejin and his brother were leaving the city where the meeting of the heirs was taking place, and everyone was happily saying goodbye to them. But Hyejin did not even look back at them. A girl who was watching him leave noticed that he didn't even turn around. As Hyejin was walking away, her red-haired friend, Yunwoo, came up to the girl and said with admiration, "He's amazing, isn't he?" Yunzwa knew Heejin well, as she had constantly watched him on his way to becoming one of the 7 great clans, which happened in a very short time. Both girls were amazed by his strength and confidence, and they could not believe that such a person really existed. Yunhua hoped that she would soon meet Heejin again, and wondered if they would be on the same side of the conflict when they met again. It was not known whether they would become allies or enemies, but curiosity and expectations of the next meeting remained. As Heejin walked away, he was watched by another friend who hated him with all his heart and avoided any contact after the past events. This man stood off to the side, pounding on a wooden beam, his eyes filled with anger at every glance at Heejin. Hate filled him every time he saw Heejin. He banged loudly on the wooden window and decided that his servants should inform the boy from the Tang clan of his feelings and intentions. All of this was happening under the mysterious gaze of a friend who, although standing in the shadows, was already planning how to regain his influence and take revenge on Heejin. With tension in his voice and hatred in his words, he told his servant to leave immediately. The servant hurriedly ran to fulfill his master's order. At the same time, an ancient scroll was discovered in the Green Mountain Yen clan, where his father was stationed. The servant knocked on the door and addressed the clan leader as an elder, which caused a tense atmosphere. The chief administrator entered the room with a scroll in his hand. He had important information for the head of the clan. Among other news, the news that the young master was returning to the clan was important. This news made his father happy. But at the same time, the Moyi clan handed over a letter that the clan head was to read personally. Upon opening the scroll, the head of the Yen clan felt that something was wrong, because the Moyi clan did not have the custom of writing to them. What could have prompted them to do this? Unfolding the letter, he began to read in amazement. The information contained in the scroll was truly amazing. The letter contained a proposal to unite the forces of the 2 clans, which was a surprise to everyone, and in the office of the Moyi clan elder. Interesting events were also taking place related to this proposal, which could change a lot in their relations with the Yen clan. He was the head of the Moen clan, writing intently on a scroll containing important records. At that moment, a golden-colored sparrow flew into the room, curiously watching the man write in an important font. The sparrow, unafraid of human presence, boldly flew into the room and landed. He landed directly on the ink and began to run around the scroll, leaving marks. When the head of the Moyen clan saw that the impudent bird had decided to interfere with his important documents, he waited for her to come closer to his hand and relax. Holding his breath and not taking his eyes off the sparrow, he suddenly grabbed it. Squeezing the bird in his hand and using his chi energy, he killed it. Meanwhile, the clan leader continued to write a document describing the priceless sword god weaponry belonging to the Moen clan. Nothing could distract him from this work, for the succession of his clan depended on it. In the intimate atmosphere of his chambers, the head of the Green Mountain clan carefully examines the scroll he received from the Muyen clan. The ancient paper rustles under his fingers as his mind wanders back in time. When he opened the document, he quickly realized that it was not just a letter. It was a business proposal. Unexpectedly, the Moy clan begins to try their hand at trade, which impresses the head with its boldness. Thoughtful, he recalls how 300 years ago, after a bloody uprising, their clan was forced to move from Liaoning province to the central region of Huan province. History turns the pages of a bright memory. Then they settled in the new lands, and it seemed that maritime trade would no longer be of interest to them. But times change, and circumstances change with them. Now that the unexpected is becoming a reality, the head has to rethink old plans and adapt to the new challenges that fate throws at him. However, as he reflects on the offer, he realizes that such cooperation may not be as beneficial as it seemed at first glance. Resolving this issue requires caution. He orders his servant to prepare paper, scythe, and ink because the answer must be sent immediately. Every moment is worth its weight in gold. Pulling the curtain of the window, he fills the room with sunlight, which looks like a symbol of new beginnings and opportunities. Looking outside, the head is surprised at how long he hasn't left his office. Life is far away and completely different when you are outside your usual framework. But today's weather is so pleasant that he can't help but go outside and enjoy the day. The cold but clean air fills his lungs with freshness and calmness. But despite the peacefulness of the day, his heart was pounding because his children had not yet returned home. He prayed that they would be okay, especially in this unpredictable weather. Our heroes, full of fatigue, were returning home, their bodies exhausted from the heat that prevented normal movement. The sun was blazing relentlessly, and the air was so dry that it was becoming harder to breathe with every step. John Pan exhaustedly wiped the sweat from his forehead, which was pouring down incessantly and could barely stand up from the unbearable heat. Seeing this, His brother started to worry about him, because John looked really bad. When he finally arrived, he saw the swordsman lying on the ground exhausted, and his brother, who had just gotten to his feet, sighed in despair, explaining his condition as a hangover. "We ran here from far away, Hefe, and it was so exhausting that we can barely stand," John Pan explained, stopping to rest. The commander of the swordsmen looked around and saw that their formation had completely disintegrated, and the soldiers were barely holding on. He began to loudly berate the soldiers for their poor uniforms, showering them with words of irritation and dissatisfaction. But Hyejin noticed that the swordsman's endurance was not sufficient for such conditions, and told the commander, "At this rate, they will never become worthy members of the Blue Task Force." Meanwhile, the Blue Task Force is preparing for an intensive training period that will last until they are restored and returned to service. Despite all the difficulties, Hyejin tells the commander that he will go find food for the exhausted soldiers and orders them to stay put. The commander is confused, as he feels he should have taken care of this himself. On the horizon, our hero notices a building that stands out in the forest and sets off toward it. The building's door creaked as it opened, and a ray of sunlight penetrated the dark room, where only an old glass stood. From the inside, the place looked like a bar that Hyejin had visited before, but now it seemed forgotten and abandoned. Our hero calls out loudly, "Is anyone there?" and hears a response in the form of a creaking door and a distant voice. He approaches a small window, pulls back the curtain, and asks if the place is open. The man answers in the affirmative, but Hyejin immediately adds that he needs food and water for 30 people. As soon as the owner starts to make excuses, a stranger suddenly bursts into the bar. Hyejin immediately recognizes this scoundrel. He starts the conversation with an ironic greeting. "Oh, look, it's been a long time." He was a member of the Tani clan with a broken arm, which he deserved, being a rather vicious person. "It was only 2 days ago that we last saw each other," says a descendant of the Tani clan, wrapping his broken arm, which was tied to a board. They meet in this bar, where a descendant of the Tani clan sits down next to the window and starts a conversation. Our hero can't help but laugh when he sees his opponent in front of him. He realizes that it is an ambush, but the guy, insisting on his appearance, asks if he's surprised to see him. He mocks, "I thought you'd pee your pants when you saw me, or lose another arm so I could put some fear into you." The heir to Tanya's clan only laughs in response to his words, realizing that now he will not be able to yap as confidently. Watching all this, our hero realizes that his opponent is ready to attack. Tanya's heir declares that he is already far more desperate than death, and it would be foolish of him to attack. "You have to say your last words. Poison is already in the air, and if you've heard of the shadow dance technique, you know that it has no smell or color," he warns. However, the descendant of the Tani clan is sure that his opponent knows nothing about this technique, and starts laughing. "How would you know about it? It's invisible." Feeling that he is about to regain consciousness, Hyejin pushes off the ground with all his might, preparing to attack. At this moment, when his opponent boldly declares that people like him have no right to live and cannot notice his technique, Hyejin prepares to strike. A strong punch hits the enemy's stomach with such force that it seems as if the organs are about to fly out. The heir to the Tani clan even burped out in surprise and pain, his belongings flying in all directions. A moment later, Hyejin strikes again, precisely and deservedly. The heir to the Tani clan falls, scattering furniture around, and a glass that was on the table ends up on the floor. The force of the blow is so great that he falls to his knees, beginning to burp in pain and shock. A representative of the Tani clan asks himself the question, did he really use the 3 poisonous energies? It seems obvious to him that 3 poisonous energies were enough to activate the shadow dance technique. Now he is on his knees, powerless and unable to do anything. At this critical moment, Hyejin walks right up to him. Despite looking pensive, he is ready to act. With all his might, Hyejin hits the bandaged and still healing arm of the Tani clan descendant, causing acute pain. The father of the offspring, Jin, sees Hyejin's foot hit his son's arm and is frozen in place in shock. From the top floor, he calls on Hyejin to stop, emphasizing that such behavior is unacceptable. Seeing the pain of his descendant, Jin's squad launches an attack on Hyejin with his own squad. As a descendant of the Tani clan is taken hostage by Hyejin, his people immediately ask him to stop the attack, warning of serious consequences. At this moment, Tang is lying on the floor with Hyejin's sharp boot on his throat, which is ruthlessly pressing down on him, causing him to suffer. Feeling superior, Hyejin asks others what they're going to do with their offspring. In a mixture of pain and anger, the head of the Jin clan exclaims how Hyejin could dare to take the young heir hostage. Pointing his finger at the pack of people around him, Hyejin says he has a few words for them. "If you take even 1 step forward, I will be forced to attack if you don't want this bastard's neck to break," he threatens, keeping the tension high. Hoping for sympathy for his son, the clan leader taps his foot on the floor, trying to get Hejin's attention. As Hejin's foot continues to press down on the scoundrel's neck, the fat father comes closer, trying to show calm. The tension between the parties reaches a maximum, and it seems that there is no other way out. Suddenly, the head of the clan attacks Hejin with a metal weapon in his hands, which he clearly did not expect. A shocking blow, and immediately someone's head flies off their shoulders. Blood spills everywhere. The head of the clan feels like a winner, convinced that his punch decided the outcome of the battle. However, Hejin's punch hits him in the face with such force that his jaw breaks and his teeth fly out. Having received a powerful blow to the face, the clan leader holds his jaw, and Hejin approaches him and tells him not to look for easy ways, because it is useless. Our hero demands that the enemy hand over the weapon, emphasizing that the sooner he does so, the better his chances of survival. Zdoroviak looks at the metal rod in his hand, not understanding why the young warrior is so insistent on giving it back. Gathering all his strength, he exhales air from his lungs, preparing for action. With determination, he presses on the young warrior's leg with such force that it probably broke again. The impudent and stupid owner was lying on the ground, writhing in pain and cursing himself for his own stupidity. The main goal of the Tang clan in this conflict is to preserve the heir, so they give Hejin a metal rod. Hejin, having taken the weapon, feels the power of steel in it. Immediately, he starts swinging this metal cross all over the bar, smashing furniture and everything around him. The warriors of the Tang clan realize the danger posed by their lord with such a weapon. They quickly take the old fat boss away from the aggressive ninja. All they have to do is prepare for the attack, as Hejin looks very dangerous. But the fat clan leader calms his warriors down, telling them not to try to fight because they are not on his level. Despite their leader's warnings, the self-confident warriors of the Tang clan decided to attack Hejin with swords. Seeing their arbitrariness, Hejin realizes it's time to act. He uses the metal whip in his hands to strike one of the red soldiers, literally tearing his flesh and tearing off a part of his body. The next warrior is hit so hard that his arm flies off his body, and another warrior loses his head to a flying metal tip. These maneuvers of Hejin's turn into a brutal meat grinder in which he turns on half of their squad in a matter of seconds. Despite the clan leader's warning, it was too late for his subordinates. The chains of a metal whip envelop the space, and parts of the bodies of their comrades are scattered in different directions. All this causes horror among the survivors. Hejin, filling the weapon with his energy, sows terror among the warriors of the Tang clan, who watch this picture of devastation in a state of incomprehension and fear. The blade of the iron sword stops, and the boy suddenly realizes that everything around him is covered in blood. He has overdone it. Using his powers, traces of blood are scattered everywhere, and he realizes that he has overdone it with his supernatural powers. If I had chains, I wouldn't have had to suffer so much with such a small axe, he thinks, looking back at his tool. Holding the weapon in his hands, the boy realizes that he needs to look for a new goal. At that moment, the Colossus, named Tang, kneels down and begs for mercy. Everything is in chaos, but the hedgehog decisively throws out the iron whip he borrowed. The head of the Tang clan realizes that he has never met a scoundrel like him, and is outraged by such a disrespectful attitude towards himself and his weapon. Despite the fact that death was only a minute away, his thirst for revenge did not leave him, and he decides to strike the hedge fund one more time. At that moment, when he rushes like an arrow into our hero's back, everything changes. Using a quick technique, the hedgehog grabs the son of his enemy. He throws a gingerbread man in response to the blow, and the clan leader's palm, heated by the force of the blow, pierces his son. A moment later, and he is already turning away from the horror of what has happened, as the heir to the Tang clan screams in pain, and the last sparks of life go out in his eyes. The big guy is frozen in horror at what has happened, his jaws open in shock, and he wants to scream in pain. He immediately rushed to the young owner, whom he accidentally hit, asking if he is okay, but all he gets in return are questions. Why did you hit me? And at that moment, the young master dies in his hands, while the hedgehog stands by and watches with interest how the head of the Tang clan reacts, especially after they hired the big man to protect their son, and he dealt him a fatal blow with his own hands. Fear and horror gripped the big man, and he was terrified to realize that he would be punished for such an act. But the hedgehog offers him an alternative if he wants to survive, if he can answer his questions in this state. But on his knees and with nothing to lose, the big man realizes that he has to answer. Hejin asks, "Why aren't you talking?" Silence envelops the room where this terrible event took place. Our hero bows before the Tang clan protector, sitting down opposite him. He tells him that this place is far away from Hefei City, and that they have arrived here after 2 days of running. "Doesn't this seem strange to you?" the hedgehog asks. wondering if the big man is from Sitchin. A chill runs through the big man's body, and he doesn't understand how the hedgehog knows that this is the way they will come here. But despite this, the guy says that there is no need to complicate things for both of us. He looks the big guy straight in the eye and asks him who told him that they would be here. And the big guy, having no choice, tells him everything. After a while, the alarm sounded in their camp, where his brother John Penn and their army were. The commander of the elite guard looks into the distance. He sees a hedgehog walking away unscathed despite all the vicissitudes. The hedgehog's clothes are covered in blood and he is carrying a sack. He apologizes to the young owner for keeping him waiting, but the commander of the guard cannot understand what happened and why there is so much blood on his clothes. When the guards saw the master covered in blood, they suspected that he had gotten into trouble and had miraculously survived. But he reassured them, saying that the blood was not his. He goes to his brother John Pan, who is sleeping on the ground, not having heard his brother come, and puts a piece of food in his hand. He tells the security commander that he has already taken care of everything, and there is no reason to worry. Before going to bed, he gives his brother John a snack. The commander of the guard asks with interest whether he ordered the murder of these scoundrels. The hedgehog says that he did not kill them, although he could have treated them even worse. His cold words give the team goosebumps. In a low voice, he adds that he had to take some additional measures. Sometimes unjustified rumors are stronger than the steel of a sword, he says, lifting the spirits of his team. After a while, a chariot belonging to one of the high clans rushes at high speed. She enters a large castle, continuing her journey forward. A guy in snow-white boots gets out of the chariot. It was the young master Nam Gun-hyun, who arrived at his father's place of business. Walking down the streets, he tried to keep himself in check, and people around him recognized him. He couldn't understand the atmosphere that prevailed in the city and why he was greeted so coldly. But when he entered his father's office, he did not expect to see what he saw. When he returned to his father in a calm environment, he found him doing something unusual. His father was covered with scrolls on which he was drawing orchids. This symbol had always meant bad things, because he used it when he needed to calm himself in moments of deep anger. With anxiety in his heart, he asked his father what had happened. "It's true, Hen," his father replied. But the boy did not understand what true meant, and asked his father to explain. "You used someone else's blade to kill a man," his father said, and Hen felt his breath catch in his throat. The father continued, "There is a rumor that you ordered the eldest son of the Tang clan to kill the young master of the Yen clan. Is this rumor true, or is it a lie?" The father's anger was boundless, and he seemed to believe the rumor was true. It was clear that the father was very angry, but he tried to restrain himself by asking his son if he had used the blade to attack the man. He hoped that his son would make sure that his identity remained a secret. Perhaps the father was mistaken in his accusations, and it was difficult for the boy to respond to his words because he did not know what to say. With his head bowed, the son begs his father's forgiveness, but he replies, "Even when Sankhwa was injured, you did not hesitate to make such a gross mistake. Tell me, son, what is the reason for your actions?" The father continues. After making an assumption, he says, "The first option is that something has thrown off your temper. The second option is that Yunhojin turned out to be more difficult than you imagined." Turning to the boy, he adds, "How about something else?" But both options were actually true, and the son realized that his father knew everything and things were not going well. "You liked your eldest daughter so much that you decided to commit a crime," his father tells him. While restraining himself, he is furious with his son, because the only time a man weakens is when he falls in love. And the moment you fall in love, you immediately lose control of everything, including your self-control. The father, pruning the tree, says wisely, "There is no excuse now," and shocks the boy by saying that he has sent the hawk of the Chu clan. These words put Heng in a stupor. He was ashamed of his father's actions. But he, the son of the head of the great Nam Gud clan, must meet the high standards required for a daughter of the Ju clan. Stammering, Hen tells his father that this is unnecessary and useless. But his father replied, "Don't deceive yourself, son. I told you that you should not treat her as a wife, but as a personal stone for your self-control," trying to convey to his son the depth of his words. Hen, pulling himself together, clenches his fist and decides to answer his father. He says that he lost to him once, but he will never let it happen again, to which the father recognizes his son in these words and gives him a break. However, his anger does not subside, and he continues to do his routine work so as not to take his feelings out on his offspring. After thinking about it for a minute, the father realizes that things can't go on like this, and decides to settle the matter with the Yen clan family. 20 days have passed, and we move to the Yen clan. Exhausted from the road, Hyejin and his brother Jongpen returned from a long journey. The father was amazed at their exhausted state. He greets them with a strange look, looking at them as if they were hungry children, lost and exhausted. Choking up, the father says he is very happy to see them back and greets Yeonpen, sending him to rest, and he is relieved to finally be able to breathe. Hyejin, in turn, sits down next to his father at the table, where the general pours him tea. The cup was warm, and when the guy smelled the drink, it was warm. He drank it in one gulp. The general was amazed by this act, because the cup contained real boiling water. After the general poured the tea and left, my father began to ask Hyejin about his condition. Hyejin confidently replies that he had a little workout on the road. What kind of workout? Asks his father. Hyejin replies that it was nothing special. They were just running, and the training task was to run actively for 8 minutes. Then the guys would do a little jogging just to get in shape. Hyejin continues. At the beginning of the journey, he increased his jogging time by 8 minutes every day, which shocked his father, especially since Hyejin was doing it with Jongpeng as they were returning. But not only they took part in the training, but the entire swordsman's unit, including the leader Shin, also participated. My father was amazed to learn that all these people had been running every day for exactly 20 days. Aren't you tired? Her father asks worriedly. Hyejin replies, that was just the beginning. The beginning of what? His father asks curiously. The boy replies that this is the beginning of reaching the top of martial arts, to which he has devoted his entire life and wants to be confident in his abilities. Looking at his son, the father realized everything. He remembered that his son changed after that day. From a weak young man with no big plans for his life to a strong, brave, grown man. He couldn't help but be happy for him. But he had a few questions about the rumors of some clashes with the Namhood clan. The guy replied that the attempt on his life was planned from the very beginning, and they wanted to kill him right away. So he told his father the whole truth, which turned out to be horrifying. After this story, the boy watched his father's face. It was the first time he had ever seen him with such a stern expression. That's what happened, the father said, but the boy asked for details of this particular moment. The head of the Namgun clan personally apologized to Hua Namgun's son, so that the latter realized what he had done. This deeply affected our hero and meant that the father and Hyejin understood what was happening. He abandoned his daughter so that his son would not lose face, attributing her attempted murder to a personal dislike that had nothing to do with clan affairs. And the Namgung clan, which embodies the cunning of the snake, was not only smart but also skillful, like a snake. Their ability to find a way out of difficult situations has always been impressive. If you notice that, then your insight is awake. So I think we should accept their apology, said the father. The guy replied that the martial artist's life would always be in danger, and he was fine with that, and that it would be a good thing for their reputation to accept the apology. His father reacted to his words with restraint, saying that he understood that he was tired and needed rest, so he would not keep him. The boy got up from his seat at the table and went to the door, but his father suddenly stopped him. When the boy turned to him, his father was standing in front of him and was silent. After holding back the intrigue, my father said that he had tried very hard, and that was glorious. When he heard these words, the guy was quite shocked. He proudly accepted his father's words and closed his eyes to hold back his tears. He said proudly, "It was easy." The next morning, his training began in the village. Wearing chained armor, harnessed in chains, and holding powerful weights on his hands, he decided to start training to increase his strength, become better, and improve his reputation. After checking that his body was burdened with a lot of weight, he realized that the workout would be very strong and difficult. He started running with all his might, realizing that it would not be easy. Jogging had a huge effect, as his endurance increased significantly. A month after such long training sessions, he significantly improved his physical fitness, and 2 months later, he was already feeling very well. 4 months passed, and he reached the peak of his strength, and his energy changed dramatically. While everyone was celebrating and going on holidays, he was training and didn't even notice how the new year came. Silence reigned in the village, and the boy was back to training. After wearing the armor for a long time, he took it off to see the results of the waiting agents. His body was transformed, gaining new physical fitness, and he looked like an athlete. He had finally achieved what he wanted, and was preparing to embody a new image. Despite such hard training, he finally reached a physical shape that allowed him to meet the thief face to face. A few days later, he received a letter from his poor friend. The friend had completed an investigation into all of his requests, and things were more complicated than expected. Although he was sure that Hyejin knew it, the poor man himself had nearly gone bankrupt fulfilling the request without a thought, almost spending all the money he had collected begging. So he needed at least some kind of commission for his work. He plans to visit him in a month, so the guy needs to prepare a lot of delicious food. If he doesn't like the food, he may make a scene for not fulfilling his task. When he read the message from his old friend, he smiled because he was pleased that his request had been fulfilled. It is important to clarify that the poor will come to him. If he's going to come this far just to tell me what could be conveyed in a letter, then there are only two options. The information is very important, and there could be problems if it leaks or he has a lot on his mind. Holding the letter in his hand, he realized that after receiving this information, it was his time for real action. He embodied confidence because he had been preparing for this for a very long time. His father was watching him closely, and from afar it was clear that he was hiding something from him. His eyes were intently looking at his son, and he began to suspect something, wanting to turn to him. Heejin, noticing that his father was watching him closely, did not understand what was happening. The father came closer and asked if the boy had finished his training today, to which Hegan replied that of course he had. Since he had no other tasks, he was free and said to his father, "Yes, follow me." This situation was a little unusual for his father, and the boy felt a little uncomfortable. He even thought that he might have done something wrong, although in fact, he had only been practicing all these days. They went into a dense bamboo forest where silence reigned. At that moment, his father brought him to this place and wanted to show him something. The boy realized that this was a forest where the true natural Azure chi energy was located, and they went deep into the forest together. When he reached the weapons rack, his father offered him to choose one of the swords. The choice was quite wide, and the guy could go wild with the choice. He carefully examined the variety of weapons, and realized that choosing a weapon meant the long-awaited training session with his father. A training battle with his father meant a serious fight where they could measure their strength. This was surprising to him, because it was a great honor. He asked his father if it was true, and his father replied that the seriousness was beyond question. "Why would I have brought you here if it wasn't serious?" said my father. A few minutes later, the guy chose a large, long, sharp spear from the variety of weapons. Filling it with chi energy, he swung it in the direction of his father. The father, analyzing this information, immediately noticed that his son chose a spear over a sword. This meant that the son was going to use a ranged weapon, while the father had the great sword of a great warrior. The father dodged his son's blow with a quick movement, demonstrating his fighting skills and experience. My father had one more trick up his sleeve. Holding the sword in his hands, he filled it with the energy of his fertile chi so strongly that the ground beneath them began to crack. It was the technique of the initiated sword of the king's 8 children that deeply impressed Heijin. Mastering such a serious technique made the upcoming battle especially exciting. Looking directly into his father's eyes, Heijin began to analyze the situation when he heard his voice. My father said, "Before we begin, do you know why I wanted to see your martial arts techniques today?" Heijin thought his father wanted to see him grow as a warrior. Everything was absolutely right, but there was one more big reason. "What is that reason?" asked Heijin. Taking the sword in his hands, his father replied that he would tell him only after the battle. Putting the sword to his face, he saw his son's reflection in the blade, and they understood each other without words. A father and son face each other in a field of bamboo forest, ready to fight and demonstrate their techniques to each other. Pushing off the ground, Heijin rapidly picked up speed. Swinging his spear, a second later he struck his father, who was standing calmly in place. Of course, these blows were like child's play for my father, and he easily parried each of them with his sword. The excitement of the battle ignited Heijin, and he realized that the fight would not be easy, and therefore it would not be easy. He needs to get stronger and attack with more powerful blows. Continuing to attack, Heijin threw his spear again and again, but all the attacks were controlled by my father, who deflected every blow with his sword, but it was clear that he was tense. After a long defense, my father decided to go on the offensive. When he swung his sword, he missed like lightning, and the energy of the blow slipped past Heijin. Noticing the moment when his father relaxed a little, Heijin stretched his arm forward, focusing all his energy in it, and decided to use one forbidden technique. This technique was called the ice swallow method, which corresponded to my father's dragon power technique. The explosion of energy from these two techniques captivated everyone present. The trees in the forest began to bend and crack from the force of the blows. The two great warriors stood against each other, amazed by the techniques and strength they possessed. The father did not expect to see such impressive abilities from his son and was very surprised. Since his son had reached such a high level, his father decided to test a completely different technique on him. Raising his sword up, he divided it into several swords, which hovered in the air like ghosts, asking his son what he thought of it. Seeing this, Heijin realized that he shouldn't waste time thinking about it, because the stakes were very high. My father attacked, and the bamboo under his feet and near his sword cut like paper. Leaving a trail of chaos behind him, the clan leader's sword moved behind his back, preparing to strike. At a critical moment, the guy almost lost his concentration, but noticed in time a powerful blow and managed to dodge it. The force of the blow was so great that the bullet had gone several kilometers ahead, and if it had hit the boy, the consequences would have been catastrophic. When he got to a safe distance, he thought it was just a drill, but then he saw again that his father prepares another strong attack, and the determination of the sword is reflected in his father's face. This made him lose control of his energy, and he began to fill every cell of his body with it. Filled with even more strength, he launched a counterattack with even more power. This deeply impressed his father, and the boy, in turn, promised himself not to back down under any circumstances, and rushed at his father with tremendous energy. Heijin rushes straight at his father with all his might, and his mighty spear, filled with incredible energy, flies in his direction. And although it was a training exercise, their cold steel weapons were aimed at each other. Soon they met in counterattacks, and their swords crossed. Our hero looks at his father and realizes that he is doing well. Their fight was filled with various techniques and blows, which they cleverly attacked and defended. The father was surprised by his son's last attack, because when he rushed forward, the son suddenly reduced the strength of his sword. Using constant pressure, defense, and more powerful attacks, they continued to compete. In other words, the tactics were designed for real combat, and it was very easy to understand. The fight continued, and Heian attacked. The father made a lot of effort to deflect his son's blows. To demonstrate who's in charge, the father activates a powerful punch that knocks Heian aside. Falling to the ground from the force of this chi energy, Heian rushes back at high speed. When he lands, he slides on the ground and cannot stop, so he has to drive into the ground. Heian stopped and surveyed the situation, and the father looked at his son, realizing that Heian had twisted his sword several times, and it was closing even the opportunities that Heian was trying to open. The father realized that his technique was as strong as a stone wall. Heian realized that his father's style was approaching martial arts perfection, and having filled himself with chi energy, he decided to drop everything superfluous and seriously attack his father. He was going to attack his father to achieve better results in training. His excitement for this fight was off the charts, and he even lost his temper a little. When he saw this, my father was surprised, realizing that the battle was reaching a new level. But the great warrior, the head of the clan, cannot lose to his son. Having filled his sword with chi energy, he is ready to withstand his son's blow. And they clashed in the final confrontation, where Heian attacked and his father parried the blow. Like a meteor, the boy rushes into battle with such speed that he leaves only a plume of smoke behind. His father, anticipating his son's attack, is ready to crush his naive hopes. Their weapons clashed on the battlefield, and the swords clashed with a loud sound. A strike of incredible power performed by two great ninja masters captured the entire space around. The force of the impact was so great that the surrounding bamboo canes began to break. A huge mushroom of smoke rose above them, as if from an explosion, and everything around them shook from the power of the impact. After the battle, the grassy ground became clay, and pebbles started jumping on the ground. Heian looked at the destroyed bamboo forest and realized that everything had been torn down and uprooted. His hand was shaking, and he realized that he wanted to continue this battle. It was extremely difficult to achieve the energy of the white tiger, unless it was a matter of life and death. But at the same time, it was impossible to compete with my father on such levels. My father put his sword back in the place where the bulk of the swords were kept. The father asked his son how he liked his equipment. Heian replied that he thought it was close to perfect. This was a good point because my father's attack, defense, evasion, and counterattack in battle were flawless, without a single miss or flaw. His father said that his technique encompassed all these aspects at the same time. It was a real martial art. And watching Heian, he realized that his son had identified his technique from the first time. After hearing the entire analysis from his son, the father felt proud of him. He put his hand on a bamboo rack of weapons and wanted to tell his son that he really wanted him to follow in his footsteps. He chose his words carefully because he was not usually sentimental. The boy stood there unable to say anything, but his father continued. I am, first of all, the father of 2 sons, so I would like you both to follow in my footsteps. However, his father said that during the battle he realized that Heian had chosen a different path. I saw where you were really headed, he said. The boy asked where his father thought he was headed, and he replied that Heian had no desire to become the head of the family. His father spoke out, convinced that Heian's destiny was not in these mountains. His destiny was turned to peace, and this was the main reason for their clashes. He wanted to check whether his son had the desire to become at least a small head of the family. Heian was amazed to hear about the concept of a small head of the family, because he did not fully understand it. A little upset, the father continued. Even parents cannot influence the future of their children, As he was leaving, he said that the fight was good and that maybe they would organize similar ones sometimes. As his father was leaving, Hyejin called out to him, stopping him. My father returned, curious to know why Hyejin had stopped him, to which Hyejin replied, even if I go the other way, my heart will always remain here. Even if they call me a demon, I will defend our family. And I'm ready to turn my sword against this world if it threatens our village. These words made Hyejin's father a little worried. What nonsense, his father said, clearly displeased. He was furious to hear his son say that someone could call him a demon. My son cannot be called a demon, he said firmly. He added that anyone who called his son a demon would fall under the blade of his sword. These words became a symbol of their unity that day, and all they had to do was rest after the battle. In the village where his room was, Hyejin fell on the bed because it was night. He had a lot to think about today, about the battle, and what his father said about his potential to become a young clan leader. Hyejin realized that his father probably wanted to make his brother Jongpeng, for whom he had always had high hopes, the clan leader. And although Hyejin didn't try to please his father, he just tried to be himself. Hyejin reflects on himself in his apology to his father. He has a job to do. If he does not destroy the thieves, the clan will have no future. The alliance that seeks to take full possession of Chuanya is a reminder of how Black Island was once drenched in blood. All these concepts, like a small head, thieves, and alliance, make the guy's head explode with pressure. Across the street from his house, his father watches from his room in the distance and drinks delicious tea. He also reflects on his son's words and puts the cup down on the table to analyze what he said once again. Recalling his son's words, he realizes that Hyejin said that his heart would stay here, and it would be hard. Just as he was putting the tea down, the general comes in and asks why he didn't like his tea. General Tegan replies that the weather has gotten colder, and he needs to drink more tea. But he's holding a scroll with interesting information. Since he received a response from the Moya clan, this was really valuable information. Having opened the scroll, the head of the Yen clan strains his eyes to read what is written there. Having shown perseverance in the face of new beginnings, they do not lose hope. He asked the general what he thought about this, but the general was surprised that his opinion was taken into account. The general replied that it was worth doing business with this clan because the Moyi clan was very capable. If things go well and you make a profit, you will be able to meet the needs of those who need it, he said, hearing his general's words. The clan leader thought, scratching the back of his head. He realized that meeting the needs of his people made some sense, although it was not that simple. The general continued. If you think that the Moyi clan is worthy of attention, then the general suggested that he could marry his son to a daughter of the Moya clan. At that moment, the clan leader had a picture in his mind of marrying his son Hyejin to a daughter from the Moyi clan. Although it was a rather risky idea, it looked quite interesting. After this dialogue, the head of the Yen clan continued to discuss the girl from the Moyi clan with his general. He imagined his son Hyejin next to a girl from the Moy clan. The general said that she is much talked about because she is not only beautiful in appearance, but also has a wonderful character, which makes her an excellent candidate for the role of the young heir's wife. After all, in the future he will become the head of the family, and in this case, it is important to have a reliable wife by his side. Such a wife will help him with housekeeping and family matters. My father seriously considered this proposal, which seemed reasonable to him. As he looked out of the window and drank another glass of tea, he realized that marriage was indeed a good idea. And 10 days later, training with his brother Yeonpen, a guy came up to them and said hello. Hey! It was their old friend Bumshik, who greeted them and said, Long time no see. They greeted the uncle, who said that he had not eaten for 3 days, and had come to them in the hope of finding some food. Hyejin jokingly replied that if he left even a small drawing on the plate, they wouldn't even give him soup. They invited him to their home, where a table was set for him with excellent food and a variety of dishes. And within 10 minutes he had tried everything, and the entire table was eaten. Yeonpen watched as the poor man quickly ate everything and asked him if he was a monster. The poor man replied that they underestimated him, and that when he was younger, he could eat 12 pounds of pork, and it was not a problem for him. But now, it is not so easy. Thinking about it, Hyejin realized that 12 pounds of pork would not be enough for 36 people. His hospitality knew no bounds, and he offered the poor man tea. The poor man was sitting at the table, and said he wanted wine instead of tea. But since it was already daytime, it didn't matter to the poor man, because it didn't make a difference to him. Hyejin asked his brother to go and get some wine, and he agreed. Since the poor man had already eaten, they decided to move on to discussing business. And the first thing they did was ask the poor man to ask for something. The poor man started by wanting to understand what was happening in Murim. He noted that, apart from the strange things that happened at Xiaolin Temple, where small insects started coming out, nothing was happening. He also asked if Heejin had heard about the emergence of any groups that could harm the locals, such as demonic factions. The poor man had not heard of such groups. He noted that it was very quiet, as if no one was there. Heejin thought to himself that the Samgech clan had not yet begun to act. The second request concerned Moen-gun's younger brother. The poor man wanted to check whether he had been properly assigned the task of finding out where he was and what he was doing. He pulled out a scroll from his pocket that contained all the details of Moen-gung's life and handed it to Heejin. The poor man looked at Heejin with great sincerity and determination. When Heejin opened the scroll, he wondered why he was looking for information about his free brother. The scroll stated that Moen was a seafood merchant in Chengjiang. The poor man confirmed that the Moen clan controls the area, and this trade is rumored to account for about 1/10 of their income. And he has great qualities and impressive talent. They say that he is the complete opposite of his brother by nature. This was a truth that Heejin already knew. Because when he was emperor, his brother, who had escaped, even bowed at the feet of him, the leader of the Black Isles. My brother was a modest and deep man, and our hero understood this. That guy was necessary to unite the White Islands and Marima with one force, as it was in the Black Islands. And the third request, which caused a lot of problems, but the poor man decided to ask the question. He tells Heejin how he knows, but the guy, having drunk the wine, asks, "What exactly?" The poor man once again speaks of the strongest, giving a hint for reflection. Heejin almost choked when he heard. How does he know that the Gujun Meng clan is secretly raising the Sword of Death? And this was a revelation for our hero. Somewhere in the remote mountains, workers are digging for steel stones, hitting them with a pickaxe. They mine these stones, which they find in large quantities in caves and tunnels. Someone sent them there and is monitoring their work, as it was extremely necessary. The boss came to check on his employees and asked the servant how things were going, and was told that they would be done in 5 days. The boss was impressed with this, because it was very good when it was over. He ordered all the workers who worked in the mine to be buried right there. And this man was the head of the Gujimen Menshon clan, a real criminal who was involved in forbidden things. The servant asked him if he had any concerns about the order, to which Gujimen replied that he was certainly concerned because the martial art of his ancestors should be in his hands. 300 years ago, he and the emperor of the 4 martial directions defeated the blood religion and adopted some of the martial arts from them, and he thought the rest of it had disappeared until he discovered it here. It was the emperor's own technique, which combined 4 areas of martial arts, and it gave him the strength to fight the 30 strongest factions. He also asked his servant if there was any news from the Moya clan, to which the servant replied that they seemed to be in no hurry to answer. The emperor said that Mongun was too weak, and if they do not support his proposal, he will have to destroy them, because if gentleness does not work, only force remains. The servant, impressed by his words, asked if he would really do that. The angry emperor replied to the servant, asking if he was really interested in knowing. Asked what exactly he was talking about, the emperor clarified that it was the newly acquired military equipment of the Gujimen clan. He raised his burning hand and said that it was necessary to test how long the Baeksanyen clan could hold out, realizing that a great war would soon begin. The cold forest, bare of leaves and covered with winter frost, became the arena for Heejin's training. A mighty sharp dagger is torn out into nothing. Hitting a tree, the dagger leaves a huge hole and continues its flight. Heejin, who threw the blade, was illuminated by his energy, which was swirling in the vortex of his technique. He was enraged and tried to vent his anger caused by the information he had received. The moment he learned about the development of the Death Sword, energy filled the room. The poor man who saw this was amazed by the boy's boundless strength, which, like fire, destroyed everything in its path. He was holding a mug, which cracked and broke into pieces from his energy. After that, there was a huge explosion from Heejin, which filled the entire room, scattered all the furniture nearby, and hit the poor man. He did not know what to do against such equipment, and the poor man covered his face with his hair to protect himself from flying objects. Heejin was so enraged and filled with power that his energy flew into space. The poor man's heart sank in his chest and he almost stopped. Under the influence of Heejin's energy, the poor man felt that his power was so great that it almost tore his heart out. Heejin decided to calm himself down, because he was giving off an aura that almost pierced his friend. Perhaps in his past life he was an enemy of the Meng clan, the poor man thought. And during training he tried to take out his anger by smashing everything in his path. The hot energy inside him did not let him rest. Trying to control himself, he could not calm down. His anger knew no bounds, especially because they had dared to kill his father in a previous life, and he realized that everything was coming to this. Trying to release his energy, Hejin realized that these scoundrels wanted to bury his brother and destroy his family. In this life, he has to take revenge by screaming and throwing out his anger at the world around him. Around him, within a radius of 100 meters, the entire space was without a single leaf on the trees. Everything destroyed by his powerful energy. Hejin stopped when he heard someone approaching. His father came up behind him and commented that what was happening looked more like anger venting than learning. Seeing his father, Hejin calmed down, but his anxiety remained, and his father asked him about it. The boy did not know how to explain his feelings, and said that he was probably just worried about his slow progress in school. But your skills are already comparable to the head of the family. You shouldn't be in such a hurry, his father told him. He agreed with his father, and after a while his father gave him a book. It was a manuscript. His father told him that his martial arts technique was meant for attacking. So far he had been relying on his physical data, but the period of expenditure of strength would be very long, and vulnerability could arise. The answer to his question is dragon power, the power of counterattack. This manuscript will help him develop his fighting skills. Of course, if he has his own techniques and a desire to wake up the blue dragon, then there will be no problem with a counterattack. Holding this manuscript in his hands, the boy did not know how to thank his father. Hejin compared his gratitude to how his father would have reacted in a similar situation and decided to express it. He thanked his father with all his heart. His father watched his reaction, waiting to see what he would say next. With his back turned to him, his father asked if Hejin was planning to leave the land, to which Hejin replied, "Yes, I am leaving tomorrow." He thought to himself that it would be difficult for him to avoid conflicts within the clan. He needed to assess the enemy's strength, and his father accepted his answer with understanding. "Follow me," the father said, implying that he had another gift for his son. They started walking down the street, going beyond the clan. They were walking through the city at night, two big strong warriors on their way to a certain store. It was a tavern where high-quality weapons were made, known for its craftsmanship. The guy recognized it immediately, as this tavern had long been in his mind. Opening the door, they went inside. His father, upon entering, turned to Old Pen and asked if he was there. At that moment, the old man put down his hammer. He wiped his hands, which were contaminated with grease and iron dust. He replied, "Here's the head of the Yen clan, and this was Master Peng Ilgun." Looking around the forge, Hejin realized that they were in the smithy, and the gunsmith said that the goods were ready. Having demonstrated his product, he assured me that it would not be difficult to show it, and 2 weeks was enough time to produce it. He approached the object and began to remove the sheet that covered it. The guy was watching closely what was under the sheet, and was very surprised by what he saw. When the sheet was removed, the thing that became his new love was underneath. It was a huge axe, sharpened on all sides, with a sharp tip and a massive handle, similar to the one he had in his previous life. When he saw it, the guy was delighted and wanted to pick it up immediately. His father asked him what he was waiting for and encouraged him to pick up the axe as soon as possible. Taking it in his hands, he felt the strength of the wood, the fasteners, and the weight and strength in his hands. His hands immediately felt the weight of the massive blade. Swinging this axe, he felt incomparable power. Holding the axe in his hands, my father asked if he liked it. The boy replied that it was heavy, just what he needed. The father realized that this was exactly what his young son needed. They left the forge not empty-handed, but with this mighty axe. They left this province and went towards the mountains to their clan, carrying with them a new powerful weapon. Hejin walked with this huge axe on his shoulder, feeling its weight and power. My father started the conversation with an unexpected question. "Have you ever thought about marriage?" It was the kind of subtle question that Hejin didn't expect to hear. For the moment, he told his father that he hadn't thought about it, but asked if his father had any specific suggestions for him. To which the father said, "What do you think of the daughter of the Moin clan? They say that she has various martial skills." He asked why this particular clan, as there were many others. My father replied that the Moin clan had offered to trade together, and so he thought of marriage as a way to strengthen relations between the clans. When he heard his reaction, his father said that, to be honest, he himself was against marriage without love. Hearing his father's words, Hejin realized that the Moin clan was trying to improve relations with his family. But why now? Reflecting on the Moin clan before he returned to lead his own clan, he recalled that after the death of the Yen clan, his native clan, the Moin, were considered stronger. The Moin clan was the one who wanted to destroy his family, not the Gujimen clan, which is the enemy of all that is wicked. While the Gujimen clan was gradually losing strength, an important realization came to Hejin. How can we explain the clan's downfall and the fact that it is now called the Ming clan? Hejin reflected on the relationships between the Moin clan's maritime trade, invasions by a hostile clan, and attacks. He decided to ask his father a question, to which he received the answer that none of his parents would have married their son without a good reason. but someone could have suggested it. His father said that it was General Tengen, and the words shocked Hagen. General Tengen seemed to be simple-minded, always smiling, and dealt with the clan's financial operations. He was very inconspicuous, but my father warned me not to take the general's offer hostile, because it was for the good of their family. A chill went through Hagen's soul. He had always suspected that there was a traitor within their clan, but it was hard to identify him. At that moment, Hagen realized that the traitor could be a person very close to his father, and this realization filled him with mixed feelings, from pain to anger. When he thought about the possibility of betrayal so close, the snowfall took over the mountain peaks, and the general, trying to avoid the blizzard, hurried to his hut. The wind whirled the snowflakes, making them dance chaotically in the air. Opening the door, the general immediately felt the piercing cold that had escaped. He began to gently shake the snow off his military overcoat, each movement accompanied by the melody of creaking snow. Suddenly, in the midst of the silence, an unexpected, "Hello, manager!" The general stirred, and his heart leapt at the greeting. In a chair, with his legs gracefully crossed, sat a Hagen, a young man who seemed to have been waiting for the general for a long time. His gaze was full of patience. The general was surprised to see the young man in his house, but the boy came with a special purpose, to discuss something important. Immediately, the general was struck by the boy's intention to talk. He asked for some time to talk, seeming extremely interested. They settled down at the table, and the general was all ears, ready to listen to the boy with all the attention he was capable of. In an effort to demonstrate hospitality, the general prepared aromatic tea, which always helped create a cozy atmosphere. The conversation began with the guy's unexpected words. "I heard you mention my upcoming wedding?" His voice sounded particularly interested. The general apologized, embarrassed, because he didn't want to say anything unnecessary. "If I have offended you in any way, I sincerely apologize," he said, feeling a little uncomfortable with his rash words. Hagen sipped his tea and reassured the general. "I am not offended at all," he said, feeling the pleasant warmth of the hot drink. "On the contrary, I really like the idea. What man wouldn't want to marry a beautiful woman?" commented Hagen with a smile, enjoying the aroma of tea. But there was a note of doubt in his voice, and Hagen was in no hurry to make a decision. "Your taste is a little disappointing," Hagen suddenly remarked, looking at the general with suspicion. The general, surprised, replied, "What do you mean?" His face expressed bewilderment and misunderstanding. "My fiancée CE is really beautiful and grateful, but she's not always what I'm looking for," explained Hagen, revealing his doubts. "However, there is an alternative view on this issue," he added, preparing to express his point of view. "In my opinion, the perfect girl shouldn't be a burden. I feel like I should take care of her more than she should take care of me," admitted Hagen. "I want you to understand this," Hagen added seriously, sharing his thoughts with the general. Thinking about these words, Hagen suggested, "Please mention this to my father. He needs to know my true feelings." His voice sounded determined and confident. "I'd like you to help me marry another daughter of your clan," Hagen said with confidence, looking directly at the general. The general, impressed by the boy's courage, realized that Hagen was serious about marriage. "Yes, you really will have to get married, but why don't you choose for yourself?" he asked, encouraging Hagen to act. "This will bring me one step closer to the position of head of the family," said Hagen, realizing that this was exactly what the general wanted to hear. "But what do you mean about the future of the clan head?" the general asked cautiously, trying to understand the implication of Hagen's words. Hagen offered to speak frankly, but avoided looking directly at the general, which added to the tension of the conversation. As he approached, he whispered to the general, "Everyone knows that your father is already preparing the ground for this. Isn't that right?" His voice was filled with intrigue. Before leaving, Hagen said that he would not forget the general's efforts and asked him to take on an important role in the clan's future. The general bowed his head to Hagen and replied, "What can be in doubt? I trust you, sir. I believe that you are the only one who can help me in this situation," said Hagen, leaving the room with a sense of accomplishment. The next morning, the general visited the head of his clan, deciding to discuss the situation and the possible future wedding of Hagen. The general put a list of documents on the table in front of the clan head to be checked. The clan father, looking over the papers, acknowledged, "You have done a great job." Instead of leaving, the general began to pace nervously around the clan head's desk, unable to calm down. Having started a dialogue, he said, "Listen, Chairman, regarding the young gentleman's marriage," my father looked at him suspiciously, but still allowed the general to speak. "What do you say to another bride? We have a new offer," the general suggested cautiously. My father folded his papers and listened intently, leaning forward. "But before I argue, I ask you to listen to my reasons." the general continued, coming closer. I believe that the young gentleman does not deserve it because of his overly outstanding abilities. When he said these words, the general was afraid of the possible reaction of the clan head. The general added, "It seems to me that the gentleman would be better suited to a girl with whom he would feel more at ease, rather than an extremely talented girl. Moreover, there is a possibility that the military clan may refuse to consent to the marriage." But these words worried my father, because he did not expect to be able to refuse such an offer. The general spoke cautiously. "I have heard that the clan leader holds his daughter Yanghua in high esteem. If he gives his favorite daughter in marriage, it could affect our business. It's better to avoid possible trouble." After listening to all the general's thoughts, the clan father pondered his words. "Do you really think that business with my clan is that important? But I'm sure it is. In Khan, money is power," he replied to the general. "If the wealth of my clan increases, our profits will increase, and we will be able to improve the living standards of our people," he continued. The head of the clan thought deeply about these considerations, because he wanted to implement these changes. Without any doubt, he agreed with the general and accepted his offer. They decided to set a wedding date, although they had not decided who would become the young gentleman's wife. As he left the clan leader's room, the general was impressed by his agreement. But then the head of the clan stopped him, turning to him. "You are working very hard for the good of our clan," he said, recognizing the general's efforts. The general bowed and replied, "I'm glad I could help in some way, clan leader." His next step was to write a letter to the Moyen clan, which he handed to the ambassador to send. The general looked up at the sun and sighed with relief, finally feeling relieved of the burden of responsibility. He began to smile and then laugh as the pressure that had kept him tense for so long finally disappeared. His goal remained unattainable for 8 years, but now everything has changed. Now the head of the clan, under the guise of trade, was gradually conquering all the territories of the Zelena Hora clan. And Miss Yanghua also proved to be clever, using herself as a tool to mislead those who evaluated her. The soldiers approached the manager and greeted him, rejoicing in his success. But he turned out to be an insidious villain who sought to destroy the Yeni clan. Realizing that the head of the family was one step closer to the title of the strongest, which was great for his plans. Sensing the success of his actions, the strongest of the Moyen clan rejoiced that everything was going according to his plan. However, the same night, when he had a lot of evening activities, Heejin came to visit him. Heijin came for tea, the aroma of which was incredibly beautiful. He expressed his joy at the tea, to which the general explained that he had to spend a small amount of money for such a rare tea. Talking about the success of his actions, the general admitted to Heijin that he had originally planned to bring tea to the head of the clan. Heijin replied that he knew he was unusual, expressing admiration. The general, shocked by his words, began to scratch the back of his head and was embarrassed. "You overestimate me." But Heijin continued to praise him for managing the clan's affairs. The general replied that he would continue to do important work. Heijin, happy to be around such a person, asked, "So, have you finally made a decision?" The general expressed his hope to be of service and looked forward to further cooperation. But suddenly, Heijin began to pour the precious tea on the floor. After Heijin poured out the tea, tension arose between them as Heijin drew attention to the importance of the Yen clan's future. After filling the room with chi energy, Heijin asked the general if he was ready to tell him everything frankly. Heijin, keeping his eyes on the general, asked, "Are you ready to tell me where those rats like you are hiding?" His tone was mysterious and suspicious, as if he already knew the answer but wanted to hear it from the general himself.